December 13, 2016. This is the regular meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Let the record reflect Commissioners Johnson, Soboroff, and Goldsmith are present, and we have a quorum.
Great. I understand we have comments on a number of the consent item agendas, but we do not have comments on items 1E, F, or G. Is that correct?
There are no
H,
comments.
I, J, or H, I, and J?
There's a comment on H, sir.
On H. Okay,
I'll move all the other ones.
okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great. So call the comments on items A, B, C, D, and H, please.
On 1A, we have Mr. Herman.
I'm going to keep them on topic. Start the clock, please.
Hey, Steve. Mr. Soboroff, I was waiting for the police. I was waiting for the police, Chief. Chief Beck rode in on his horse.
Mr. Herman, this is relative to the donation of the Tough Shed. Can you please keep your comments on topic?
Yeah. Us puppets want to know, why are we supporting a shed? Why do we have to support sheds when there are people homeless living in the street? Can't Brentwood provide homeless shelters to those who live in the streets, such as myself and others? After all, puppets, if we work together, we can manage things out, and Brentwood would help. Did you hear about Westwood Apartments? The elderly are being kicked out by Paul Koratz, formerly known as AKA Peppa Pig. And you see, what is the chief of police and the inspector general gonna do to protect the rights of civilians when it comes to storage sheds? Maybe if you put all persons that are elderly and the disabled in storage sheds, then this way it's a faster way of getting rid of people from living in their homes or apartments. Incidentally though, since Mr. Soboroff likes to make fun of me, like Herb Wesson, you should try better preventing people from living in storage places and put them in warehouse. They incinerate better, Mr. Soboroff. Isn't that the deal? So, once again, as a puppet, I recommend that you do more for those who are in need of the department's report on salvaging Friends of Brentwood.
Do I have a motion to approve item 1A?
So moved.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, call the comment for item 1B, please.
We have Mr. Herman, followed by Michael Williams.
Okay, folks, since Herman is not speaking, and I'm the puppet speaker on Herman's behalf, AKA Dr. B Puppet, Mr. Herman told me to say this in regards to the $1,200 donation, that such a financial development sounds very tricky when giving out multiple divisions of special interest. Now, I'm really not too sure if I'm on topic or not, and I would just advise you that on my particular cards as I submitted, I did declare the Brown Act. So if I'm not on topic, I'll strain myself to stay specifically on this agenda itemized item, Mr. Johnson. After all, I'm a puppet like you. So let me read it out once again to you. Hi, madam. That's a nice coffee in your hand. I had mine earlier, too. Okay, let me get on different topic. Hold on. This is very important issues here. Shouldn't be wasting time, Herman. After all, they start the time before you even
You're off
speak.
topic, Mr. Herman.
Oh.
Please get back on topic.
Okay, all right, I got your attention, Johnson. To clarify, December 9th, 2016, relative for the donation of, is that tasers? Catchers? Teaser catchers, something like that. Anyways, their value is not important of $1,200, but what's important is that the Lease Police Foundation needs support. We need more donations during the training. Inadequate training is a problem with LAPD.
Call the next comment, please.
We have Mr. Michael Williams.
Clarify again, this is apparently a police agent designed, he was hired apparently to make the BLM movement look silly. One of multiple police agents who have been hired for that. And he,
Sir, can you please have a seat? If you have a comment, you can submit a card.
police agent, apparently. Excuse me, Mike. So item B, in this section is about a donation from the Police Foundation to give SWAT officers training, something about brass something, I don't understand what that means, but I saw aerial platform shooting training, right? This is to give the Metropolitan Police training to, and I actually looked it up. I was not sure what it was. It sounded violent, right? But maybe I try to give benefit of the doubt. I said, okay, maybe it's like something, maybe they're just doing, maybe they're learning how to shoot, not, less lethal weapons or something like that. Literally, the first thing that pops up when you look at aerial platform training is a video of Florence Police Department going in with a helicopter with an automatic weapon, firing this automatic weapon out of a helicopter. So that's basically you're training the SWAT team to be able to snipe people from a helicopter. You're training them to be able to kill more efficiently. That's literally what the Police Foundation is spending money and giving about over $1,000 to the police department so they can train the police department, the SWAT team, to kill more efficiently from a helicopter, like cowards. That's what you're spending your money on. That's what you're giving. That's when all the people in here that are police supporters who donate to the Police Foundation, that's what you're spending your money on. That's what you're giving your money to them for them to do. For them to train their officers to be better prepared to kill people. They didn't spend it on non-lethals. They didn't spend it on de-escalation training. They didn't spend it on any of that. They spent it on money to train officers to kill people from a helicopter. Be proud of yourselves.
Do I have a motion to approve item 1B?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Call the comment on item 1C, please.
We have Mr. Herman, followed by Mr. Agustin Cebada.
Ooh, testy, aren't we this morning? Very testy, Mr. Johnson. Did you hear about what those things can do with our donations? So the public and the Inspector General, we need to conform to a more legitimate way of dealing with our donations. After all, puppets know more about what the donations can do, how they inspire people to be murdered. The controversy use of donations is an issue here in Los Angeles. Pay to play. That's right, pay to play. I'm disappointed in this situation. After all, the Los Angeles Philharmonic Association is giving a $3,700 donation, and it says it's for food. Now, whether I can scratch my head or not this morning, I'm worried about that, Herman. I'm really worried about that. You know, when we go to the concerts, I believe that the Jewish concerts were made for Hanukkah, for us to celebrate and enjoy. But instead, I'm finding out that my donation is supporting the evil culprits of selfish greedyism. Greedyism. You know, what I miss about the Philharmonic is that it doesn't have enough puppet shows. We should turn people on to puppets so they can all support the issues in the LAPD. Although I object to all these donations and I subject an investigation by the Inspector General and Mr. Michael Moore, you should do more to investigate whether or not these contributions are killing people and are subject to kill us later.
Mr. Johnson.
Call them.
I'm a senior citizen, and I'm going to speak my mind, okay? Do you mind? And I'm very happy to see Mr. Bustamante back on this thing here, because he's done good work. He's brought a lot of good statistics about what's going on here. I know that the police department was not too happy when that Inspector General thing was put in under the consent decree back during the Clinton administration. And I know you're still going against it. There was a hit piece on the LA Times about Mr. Bustamante. They tried to say that it wasn't, but it actually was. Where did that come from? I think
So
it
this
came-
is, you're off topic. This is regarding the monetary donation from the Philharmonic for food and recreational activities, item 1C.
I'm talking about Bustamante here.
Understood. If you want to talk about Bustamante, that is more appropriate for public comment. That's not relevant to item 1C.
It says you can put it public, when you fill it out and turn it in, it says general comments. Haven't you read these things before, Mr.
So,
Johnson?
so for general comment, that is the last item on the agenda, and
But this is
and
not
you
a
feel free to
general
talk
item.
about
It's
it
not in
at
the-
general
It's part
comment.
of what you're talking about right here when you say what you want, and it says a general comment
It has to be related to the item.
related to the item. All of it that I come here for is related to any item here.
Do you have any comments related to this item?
What?
Do you have any comments related to this item?
Which item?
Item 1C.
One says yes. And then Inspector General's report that was not.
It's not,
done.
item 1C is the monetary donation from the Philharmonic.
That's not what it says here.
You're looking at 2C.
Continued from December 6, 2016, Inspector General report dated December 6, 20, relative in
You're looking at item 2C, sir. So if you have a comment on item 2C, please submit a comment.
2C. That's what it is. I got it right there.
Okay, we're on 1C. Okay, do we have a motion to approve item 1C?
I don't know how to
Do I have
write
a
the things
second?
right, so get
All in
people
favor?
confused.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Call comments for item 1D, please.
We have 2 comment cards, Mr. Herman, followed by Agustin Cebada.
Guess what? We're looking at the Dodgers here. LLC, Mr. Soberov. Doesn't LLC remind you of Hugo Rossiter and the LLC under Eric Raday, the detective who messed with one of my puppet friends? But the concern here is regarding another donation, similar to the donations that sometimes people are paid secrecy to go and investigate people who act like puppets and disrupt meetings or interrupt meetings because they're objective and they criticize those who work in their behalf. Isn't that the Ralph M. Brown Act, 54950.4.3, item C, Johnson? So let me go on with the Dodgers now. In declaring the Dodgers for an $1,800 recreational activity, where in the world do you get $1,800 for recreation? Is it for support of kids? Because I love cadets. Cadets learn from puppets, not from people who lie. Most lies come from those who who are in authority, administration. That's how they keep their positions and jobs. And that's the reason why the Dodgers are donating this money to silence the lambs. Meh, meh. Those lambs are the ones that sit here and poke at the constituents who come in and advocate, such as myself on behalf of the bigger puppet, Mr. Herman, for the record. So you see, Steve, and your cronyism of friends in development, the event at South Traffic Division Cadet Program is well welcome, but without the interest of the voluntary donations. Well, excuse you, and thank you for listening.
Call the next speaker, please.
We have Mr. Agustin Cebada.
This is about,
So this is item 1D, relative to a monetary donation in the amount of $1,890 from the Dodgers to the cadet program.
1D.
1D.
I'm on the wrong page then. 2D. Okay, with regard to 1D, I am not aware of this donation, but I think it's superfluous to what's going on here, since you have more than half of the budget of the city of LA. Why should you be over asking for money from other people to keep doing and killing more people and abusing senior citizens when they come to speak? And especially you, Mr. Johnson. I don't know if you have ever heard of the amendment to the Constitution 15, due process. Because what happens when somebody gets killed by a policeman, he shoots and kills, and what happened to his chance to be before a judge and a jury and then sentenced instead of being killed right on the moment? That's a thing that needs to be done and learned by all the police departments in this country and all the police officers. The 15th Amendment due process. That is not due process. You get your gun and you got an itchy finger and you kill somebody. Is that due process, Mr. Johnson?
You're off topic, sir.
What?
You're off topic. Can you,
Well, I'm talking about you donating money for you guys to kill more people.
this is a donation to the cadet program.
Well, you're teaching the cadets that you work early, Mr. Johnson. You convert these people early when they're youth, and then they can learn. They see what they learn not only by training but by emanating what's going on with the people that they're around. That they're all hot and they're all bothered, and they go together to bars and stuff and drink and talk. Well, we killed that guy. That was pretty cool. You shot real well, even though they didn't shoot you back. So that's what you're doing here. You're using this money to enhance a killer society, and now with Donald Trump bringing about a military dictatorship here, it's very crazy. So that'll be all I need to say to you.
Do I have a motion to approve item 1D? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. I think that brings us to 1H.
We have one comment card, Mr. Herman.
State a complaint against police agents disrupting our process here. I would like that
Sir, you're disrupting the meeting.
you fire this person.
You've disrupted the meeting several times. If you disrupt the meeting again, I'm going to ask you to leave. Please call the speaker.
Mr. Herman?
Well, you see, all we're trying to do is prevent police abuse. And if we continue to approve and adopt and accept donations, it's at the cost of the public. After all, when we're talking about police housing or hosting funds for about $1,000 an issue, the Los Angeles Police Foundation has a process called donations at will and will be used to foster and improve working relationships between the public. Now, whether the public decides to outspeak in the crowd, that's good. It creates a system of listening. And I enjoy that, Mr. Soboroff, the same way you try to listen to me as a puppet. And what about my other Uncle Tom up there, you, Mr. Johnson? I don't want the man thrown out, let him speak. It's my time. And going back on topic, H, as I brought out, H. In the community stakeholders' activism activities under the law enforcement partners with leaders from the local state, except for Los Angeles, are a bunch of criminals in corruption and disruptions of people's lives. And the federal government, who should investigate the FBI investigations of grand jury, Nuri jury. And what about this situation about the grand jury Nuri? Fraud, waste, and abuse, all impacting our adverse communities. And you as a police department, what are you doing to protect us? Westwood, cry out, shout out to all the elderly being abused by Paul Koretz. Leave them in their apartment.
Do I have a motion to approve item 1H?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. I don't believe we need reports on items 2A or 2B unless any of my fellow commissioners disagree. Do we have any comments on those items?
No comment, sir.
Move approval?
Do I have a, so we have a motion to approve items 2A and 2B. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Do we have any comments on items 2A or 2B?
I don't have any cards here yet.
We have comment cards on items 2C, 2D, and 2E.
C, D, and E?
C, D, and
Okay.
E, sir.
Okay, let's call item 2C, please.
I know, I need to get to the page. 2C.
Mr. President, I'd just
Item-
like to clarify, there was a vote on items 2A and 2B. I did not copy if it was.
Oh, sorry. All right, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okay. There were no comments submitted on those items. There were comments on items 2C, 2D, and 2E.
Okay.
It was for, spoke to the officer, he said it was for item 2E.
Okay, 2C.
Item 2C, continued from December 6, 2016. Inspector
So we're
General.
about to hear the report. Can you please have a seat?
Hold on, Mr. Johnson. I don't know if you know how to read. This is Inspector General's report. It's not.
So we've
police
not called,
inspector's.
we've not called for comment on this item yet. Can you please have a seat? We're about to hear the report.
The report should be from the.
The Inspector General's
General,
office is
not
here.
all these kiss asses that are up there.
Item 2C, continued from December 16, 2000, December 6, 2016. Inspector General's report dated December 6, 2016, relative to the investigation of the Los Angeles Police Department's Special Weapons and Tactics Selection process as set forth.
Good morning.
Good morning.
What is not known between the four corners of this six-page report is the hundreds of hours that this office and the department mutually worked together with to come to its findings. And to that end, we are working on recommendations together. Dave Barway, the case agent on this, former California DOJ agent, last assigned to investigating crimes against children, who has a tactical background, is the investigator, and he's going to present our findings to you.
Great, thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning, sir.
Good morning.
The Los Angeles Police Department's Special Weapons and Tactics Team is one of the foremost tactical units in law enforcement today. They routinely train and work with both national and international law enforcement and military groups. The SWAT team is one of only a few full-time tactical teams throughout the United States, and the personnel are dedicated professionals who train on a regular basis in order to maintain the highest standards set forth both by the individual operators as well as the department. In August of 2015, the Inspector General's office commenced an investigation into the selection process of the SWAT selection process. I initially met with Commander Prokop, who at the time was the commanding officer of Metropolitan Division, along with Captain McManus and Lieutenant 2 Ruben Lopez, also known as 10 David. Commander Prokop explained
have
that the
order.
process. Commander Prokop explained that the process had not actually began yet. However, he welcomed the investigation as well as a review of the entire process, including the preparation, orientation, selection of the candidates, and the actual 14-week SWAT school. Several days later, the department held 2 orientation seminars at the ARTC for all interested officers who were interested in applying for the SWAT selection process, as well as explaining the process to them, as well as making sure they have a clear understanding as to what is expected of a SWAT officer. In September of 2015, for the first time ever, the SWAT team firearms cadre held 2 4-hour shooting clinics for interested officers in order to expose them to the rigors of the upcoming training and the practice the necessary
Hold on one
marksmanship.
second. There's a lot of background noise. We're trying to hear the report. His mic is plenty loud, and there needs to be quiet in the audience. If you have a comment, submit a card, but otherwise, you need to at least be quiet. You don't have to listen, you need to be quiet. Ma'am, you're disrupting the meeting. The next request will be for you to leave. Okay, sir, I've given you multiple warnings. You need to leave. You need to leave the meeting. Sir, please leave the meeting. You are leaving the meeting.
It's gonna go on the Inspector General's report that you're mistreating the audience? Huh? You're mistreating people?
The meeting's not going to continue until you leave.
I'm not turning my back to these people.
Yeah. Sir, if you're not going to leave voluntarily, I'm going to have to recess the meeting and make everybody leave. Okay, we're going to recess for 5 minutes until we can get this gentleman out of the room.
I'm gonna get them right now. They're both from IG's office, I know that.
You wouldn't know about that though, would you, Matt?
Happy to be here.
I'd like to have let everybody else back in so they can manage this guy.
We need to have the room cleared. Everybody needs to leave the room, please. We need to have the room cleared. Everyone needs to leave the room, please.
Can we have all department personnel please leave the room also? The police commission is now in recess. The room needs to be cleared.
You know I'm right. Give me like, hey,
Police Commission is now in recess. Any person remaining will not be readmitted when the Police Commission reconvenes. If you do not leave the room, you will not be readmitted when the Police Commission reconvenes.
If you really felt nothing, you can sit in that chair and not crack a fucking smile. Don't say a thing. You know I get to you. I was what? Tell Garcetti I said hello.
They can all stay now.
Losing your soul that exists here. You're gonna kick everybody out of the
They can stay now, Ben.
because they don't.
Dark skinned nigga giving you them mental.
They can stay. Oh, is he out? He isn't out yet?
How's it, boy? We'll see you again. You're a coward, man. You're a coward. You're a coward.
The guy that was
Is
causing
that why you
the
didn't take
problem,
the stand to you? You're a coward?
he's been, since he got here today, he is before you got here.
House boy kicking his out.
All things about
Give me the number of your barbers so I can get my shit fucked up like yours.
We let them all back in.
Give me the number of your barber, Matt Johnson. I want my shit fucked up just like yours. Nigga look like he got a white helmet.
They could all go. No, they have no, no. What it is they have no armor. Yes, sir. Yeah, Ben. Right, yeah, yeah. That's what he's out with.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So as I was saying, for the first time, the SWAT firearms cadre held a firearm shooting clinic for all interested officers to expose them to the rigors of the upcoming training, as well as to practice the necessary marksmanship skills that would be necessary for SWAT operators, especially in light of the bonus qualification course that is part of the first phase of the selection process. During the same time, I observed numerous SWAT training days of the tenured SWAT operators in order to better understand the expectations and the demands of this elite tactical team. The training included firearms, breaching, force on force, and live fire exercises at the department shoot house. Chief, Commissioners, I do want to say that you should feel very comfortable knowing that your department deploys an accomplished, adept, highly trained group of officers who are ready to respond to any critical incident throughout the city, to include active shooters, barricaded suspects, crisis negotiation, and hostage rescue. In October of 2015, the department held the bonus qualification for all the applicants. The minimum score to move on in the selection process was a 300 out of a total of 400. This was concerning to the Inspector General's office, considering that all LAPD SWAT officers are issued and carry the department's 1911 pistol. As well as the first week of the SWAT training includes the department's 1911 transition school. According to a 2010 Office of the Chief of Police notice, any officer who wants to transition to the 1911 pistol platform must obtain a minimum score of 380. To complicate matters further, Training Division advised that sometime in 2012, this was modified to a minimum score of 365. However, they were unable to provide any documentation of that. Other than on the Training Division's website, they still post the 2010 order, and on the actual training orders, they cite the order and also state that the score is now a 365. Therefore, the Inspector General's first recommendation is that the department reconcile this issue and have one standard for all officers throughout the department. Following the bonus shoot, we continue to observe the officers who moved on in the process to include the physical fitness qualifications, the obstacle course, manipulation tests, which are then followed by the oral interviews and the background checks. Commander Prokop invited us to sit in on the actual interview process. However, we did decline, feeling that it would be an undue burden on the selectees or on the candidates. Upon completion of all of the interviews, as well as all the backgrounds, I personally reviewed all of the packages, making sure that they were thorough and complete, and didn't note any discrepancies. In December of 2010, I attended a meeting with Captain McManus, Lieutenant Lopez, and Lieutenant McMillan, in which they discussed the final selection of the candidates. During this meeting, they discussed team diversity, language skills, leadership ability, work ethic, background, and work productivity and the work history, just to name a few things. At the end of January 2016, 20 officers were selected to begin the 14-week SWAT school. Over the course of the next 14 weeks, OIG staff had routine discussions with the instructors, the sergeants, and the lieutenants. We observed the officers' weekly training, and we reviewed all of the qualification records, evaluation sheets, and the employee comment cards. Week 1 of the SWAT school included the 1911 transitions course, which we've already addressed, as well as weeks 2 through 4 were the shotgun, rifle, and submachine gun classes. During this phase of the training, there were both subjective and objective standards of evaluation, such as firearms qualifications. The firearms cadre ensured that the training environment was always safe and immediately addressed any and all firearms-related violations or concerns. While we recognize that this is a training environment for the tenured police officers, we also recognize that SWAT's live fire training is high frequency, and that to that end, the live fire training in a team movement configuration is always considered high risk. Therefore, the second recommendation from the Inspector General's office is that the department establish clear standards for deselection when safety violations do occur. It was evident that what one instructor considers a serious violation, another instructor may not. It will benefit the SWAT candidates and the instructors to have clearly delineated standards for various violations. The following weeks, 5 through 14, compounded the live fire training exercises with movement training, breaching equipment, high-risk warrant service, crisis negotiation, and culminated in high-risk hostage rescue scenarios. At the conclusion of the 14-week SWAT school, 8 officers moved on to phase 2 of the training. During this phase, the Inspector General staff met with Metropolitan Division and requested the documentation for the phase 2 evaluation process. It was explained that this is a 6-month phase in which officers are evaluated during practical application in the field. However, the only guidelines provided to the Inspector General's office by the department was the SWAT Police Officer 3 Task and Competency List, which is a 28-page document that includes 209 expected competencies of all SWAT officers. The OIG was unable to identify any of the special rating benchmarks that were discussed with the candidates during the initial orientation in the previous August, nor a Phase 2 training manual that would ensure that all candidates and all selectees were obtaining the requisite skills evaluated effectively and consistently by their training
Hold
officers.
on a second. Someone has a phone on or a radio. Can you please shut it off? If you disrupt the meeting again, I'm going to ask you to leave.
Therefore, the Inspector General's third recommendation is that the department develop a Phase 2 training manual in which they can document and record all of the officers that are moving through Phase 2. In addition to the SWAT selectee training, the OIG reviewed the SWAT sergeant training as well. In discussions with the department, we were informed that SWAT supervisors attend an 80-hour basic SWAT school, as well as practical application in the field, which is recorded in the SWAT sergeant call-out and training log. In reviewing the sergeant's teams, we observed that there was often a considerable amount of time between the date of assignment to SWAT and completion of the school. According to POST, Peace Officer Standards and Training, SWAT team operators and supervisors should not be deployed until successful completion of a post-certified SWAT course. In addition to the basic SWAT course, we understand that sergeants are tasked with many different administrative duties. However, as a sergeant in command and control of a tactical team, we also wanted to ensure that the sergeants routinely train with their teams. Therefore, we recommend that all newly assigned sergeants immediately attend the 80-hour basic SWAT school by the department, and upon assignment to the SWAT team, and on the outside within 6 months. We also recommend that all sergeants attend tactical training for a specified number of hours to ensure that they possess and maintain the requisite skills SWAT tactical operations are needed. Thank you, sir.
And Commissioner, just very quickly to put it in perspective, we initially did this report because we had heard that there were concerns about the selection process for individuals attempting to get into SWAT. And that's why we spent a lot of hours trying to review the process. And although we only looked at one class, we did a very comprehensive look, as the investigator Barraway has indicated. And we found no irregularities in the selection process, and found it to be a very professional process with no issues. In fact, the recommendations really address administrative matters within there that we think are easily remedied, and really don't reflect kind of what we were looking at. And what we saw was kind of a well-oiled machine as far as the selection process. So just wanted to make sure we put it into perspective. We spent a lot of time talking about the administrative components that need to be fixed, but I think the big takeaway here is that there were really no issues that we identified from this class, which was the primary concern of people that came to talk to us.
Great, thank you. Does the department have any comments on with regard to the report or with regard to the recommendation?
Just in general, sir, as obviously Investigator Barraway mentioned, we were very supportive of the audit process. And I'd like to say that the Office of Inspector General was very professional in their contacts within the command. We were constantly looking to improve ourselves, both inside and out. And this afforded us, again, an opportunity to take a look from a different perspective, and we're very thankful. Our personnel have spent a tremendous amount of time and effort physically reading in the investigators, so they had a perspective and understanding of the dynamics of the training, selection, and so forth. And again, we're thankful for the report. I think, in no stretch of the imagination, it validates our efforts and the process. Thank you.
Great. And you're in agreement on the recommendations?
We're looking at them individually. If you'd like me to address each one, I'm able to do that.
Or maybe just address the ones that, where there's additional work that needs to be done, and let's discuss what the next steps would be.
Specifically with number one, with regards to the minimum qualification score of 300 and the disparity at 365, we are obviously looking at it, and we're comfortable with the selection process in that it affords the command a greater opportunity to recruit well-qualified candidates with maturity, with judgment, restraint, and a wealth of experience to contribute to the overall SWAT mission. This entry-level score affords us to recruit from a greater pool of candidates. In addition, the training tempo, once certified, and the rigorous qualification schedule, which is at 90% each month with the weapon system, verifies the proficiency in the weapon system, and it validates the entry-level number.
Commander, just if you would, for the commission's, the department's going to clarify the current standard of 365 versus 380. The essence of this, as the commander's talking about, is that as we coming on board, the 300 score is a training aspect, but the 365, 380 confusion, the department will clarify that so that so the standard is clearly understood.
So they have the opportunity to increase their score, and if they can meet the 380 qualification, then they can be SWAT members?
Correct. Well, that's one aspect of it. You know,
Right.
Certainly the schooling and selection process is 14 weeks long, and this would actually be week 1. But obviously recognizing this, the organization got out in front of it, as Mr. Barraway had mentioned, and spent a tremendous amount of time in outreach and preparation with regards to shooting clinics and advice and mentoring and so forth.
Okay.
With regards to number 2, the Inspector General recommended establishing standards for deselection based on weapon safety violations. We're looking at different models. Currently, we use the same standard as Training Division, with the 4 firearm safety rules being each incident is based on gravity, frequency, and the environment of the occurrence, being sufficient based on totality. So currently, we're discussing the process with some standardization options. Specifically with number 3, Mr. Barraway made a recommendation to develop a training manual for Phase 2 of the SWAT officers once they complete the initial training. Again, we've embraced this recommendation previously, and it's in place in the form of a task and competency list. And it is exhaustive, but those are the demands of the assignment, and each tenured and newly assigned officer is held to those same standards. I think what's important is during Phase 2, the supervisors, again, have department opportunities or mediums to comment on the capability of how the new operators are actually assimilating their training into the platoon. So we're comfortable with that system.
Great.
And certainly look at number 4. We embrace training, as Mr. Barraway had said, in order to prepare our folks to meet any type of contingency, and specifically our supervisory corps. We have embraced this and more. Each sergeant, in fact, was provided training well above the minimum standard for SWAT personnel to ensure proper decision-making. In addition to the hundreds of hours of training, newly assigned sergeants shadow a tenured one for a period of 3 months and document decision-making on real-world events for the officer in charge to review. Once successful in each of these disciplines, they then begin to act in a leadership role, either tactically or on the crisis negotiation team. Moving forward, we will ensure this extensive training is captured by post-control number, which was the administrative issue here, within the first 6 months. I'd also like to note and bring recognition to the supervisory corps at SWAT that they are actually part of the revamping of the Cal Post class, and just being part of that instruction certainly gives credibility to their competency. And lastly, again, the recommendation that supervisors or squad leaders attend each training day. The commanding officer and the unit OIC certainly ensure that SWAT supervision is at each training event. Each of the core disciplines are practiced at varying frequencies based on complexities, venues, funding, and certifications, and each of these is adequately supervised by our squad leaders.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Do we have any public comment on this matter?
Yes, we have 5 public comment cards, starting with Mr. Agustin Cevada, followed by Michael Williams.
Mr. Johnson, the way you run this thing, this apparatus that you have here, this fascist apparatus, is scary to me and to other people. I mean, I want to talk to about Mr. Bustamante's thing. It says here, you're writing. It says, continue, okay. Inspector General's report.
Correct.
These are not the Inspector Generals, these are just some cops.
These 2 individuals here work in the Inspector General's office.
Do they?
They do.
They have to keep you in line? They keep you there in line? Because when the first Inspector General, which was a woman in LAPD, I would talk to her a lot because there was a lot of killings going on in the Chicano, Latino, Mexican community. And I would talk to her, and she says, I'm scared because these people intimidate me and everything like that. I hope these 2 people that you have, these 2 watchdogs that you have there, don't intimidate you, do they?
They work for me, sir.
They work for you?
They should not report.
Well, maybe you need to fire him because they're, and fire Mr. Johnson too, because he's using words. I mean, he says you can't do this because you didn't write it right, and then I point out to him that it says Inspector General's report. I haven't heard anything from you. I have not heard anything. Did you give your voice to them to be able to give a report, or did you get to, what is the basis of the report, and how will it affect the general aspect of community killings? Because the next one that I'm going to talk about is reducing harm reduction. That's a joke. Why did you even put that in there? That's a damn lie. You don't want to reduce. The way you people keep the people scared and under control is by killing people. That's the whole tactic and strategy that you have, and it needs to be dealt with right here in public. The people, you have to, I would say, Mr. Bustamante, that you mandate the due process amendment in the Constitution, Amendment 15,
Thank you for your
so that
comments,
they
sir.
will learn what due process is. I don't think they know that their whole thing is to kill first, and then we'll see what is going on.
Call the next speaker, please.
We have Mr. Michael Williams, followed by Ahmed Khan.
So, like I said, I was just watching a SWAT video about the training that supposedly you got donated $1,000, over $1,000 to have, which was aerial platform shooting, which is basically you guys going out into a field and shooting and practicing snipering people out of helicopters. Yeah. So that's an interesting way of training officers, especially SWAT officers, who are supposed to come into a situation and de-escalate things. From what I understand that the mass shooters, many of the mass shooters end up getting apprehended alive, right? So it's not a problem with SWAT, right? The selection of SWAT, it's the selection of people who take down people on the street because they think they're part of gangs, like Ezell Ford. It's the problem with people like that pull people out of cars for a traffic stop and then end up killing someone like Kenny Watkins. It's the problem with the officers that chase down a mother and shoot her in the back and then say it's justified, like Riddell Jones. That's the problem that we're having. We're not having a problem with the SWAT selection because it seems like because most mass shooters are usually white, usually they end up being surviving. And that's when you call out the SWAT team, is for mass shooters, hostage situations, things like that. And somehow they end up coming out alive so they can tell their story. But somehow innocent students, young men, 18 years old, mothers of children, are being gunned down in the street. So what are we talking about this for? Seriously.
We have Ahmed Khan, followed by Yvonne Michelle Audrey.
What we're calling this for, Michael, is that Carlos Ocaño was a homeless man in Skid Row. And he had a habit of, whenever he would be triggered, to climb up a billboard. And what does LAPD do? They bring SWAT on him. They hit him. He falls down off the billboard, cracks his skull, and he dies. That's what. And I think what's not being spoken about right now is, and I'm wondering as I'm sitting there listening to this thing, that what would Daryl Gates say right now? How Daryl Gates would be smiling right now that his dream, his wet dream, has come true. That how SWAT has been normalized. What mission creep means. I mean, Cynthia McLean Hill, Shane Goldsmith, you're presiding on this body, sitting over here. I'm assuming that you're familiar with the term mission creep. We hear about militarization. I'm hoping that you're familiar with the term, that what the intent is and how it expands. That how no-knock warrants are now, or no-knock searches have now become a routine for SWAT. How 79% of SWAT deployments are on very low-level search warrants. How 2-month-old babies have been killed and smoked to death. How 80,000 SWAT deployments are used for normal policing. So it's not an unusual circumstance anymore. It's not one of those consequences that, there's a hostage situation. This is routine policing. We have to look at it at the origin of SWAT, also in the context of COINTELPRO, to disrupt, to dismantle, to neutralize, and then you have this militarized force. That's what Daryl Gates was thinking. That's what he was bringing, that what would the assassination team look like? And how would we normalize these assassins? And that's what SWAT is doing. So I hope that you really pay heed to this. And this kind of report back and all of this thing, it's just smoke and mirrors. Look at the real thing and dig deeper.
We have Miss Yvonne Michelle Audrey, followed by Mr. Tut Hayes.
Yes, I'd like to speak specifically on the targeted individuals, those of us who have been and continually are used not only as training purposes for test sites and target practice, especially in the use and the development of electronic weapons, specifically for the sexual harassment.
Ma'am, this item is related to a report on SWAT.
Well, these are the weapons that your officers will be used and are currently being trained to use, because this is a confidential and classified special program, and I'm sure you are aware. I'm aware because I'm one of those targeted individuals, and it is relevant, and it is directly related to this topic, and I will continue in my exposition of your CIA target practices, your CIA and Black Ops, Special Ops, Secret Police, and they're targeting not just individuals who are here, but targeting people that you consider to be dissenters, or targeting people that you consider to be problems. So that is relevant, because these are weapons that your police officers, the military, international police officers are being trained to use. We have a right not to be harassed. We have a right to refuse any type of entries or any type of attacks, or we have a right to expose these SARs that are being used to justify not only the genocide of black people, marginalized people, poor people that you consider undesirable, but we have a right, again, to expose the Holocaust that you are perpetrating right now. And so this is relevant. I'm 100 pounds. How many times have the SWAT been called upon me? This is ridiculous. Does this make your people feel like you're men? You're not. You know that this is a white supremacist implementation to maintain the last stand right now, so we're exposing that. And I'm objecting again to the SWAT and the implementation and development of Secret Service electronic weapons, again, and the persecution of people who are alive, to expose this, because you are liable, fully liable. Not only in sending or commissioning your police officers to shoot black men and harass and rape black women and covering it up.
Thank you for your comments,
And the
ma'am.
sacrifices, the murders of these black women, these are sacrificial rituals.
Next, we have Mr. Tut Hayes.
I would imagine among your equipment, you would have something commonplace like binoculars, and perhaps even some night vision instruments, which are binoculars. There are 7 bullet holes in the windshield of this police car, put there by a police officer, former police officer. The result of that was there were 2 newspaper delivery women going in a neighborhood where a commanding officer, police officer, lived. The police opened fire and fired 70 rounds into that vehicle. Fortunately, they were not killed, but some were injured. If you have specialized assignments, why go and surround a high-level command officer's home and wait for the assailant to come? Why not put him in protective custody? You know how that's done. It could have been done. How many other high-level officers had their homes surrounded by police officers who were trigger-happy, didn't have night vision, couldn't see there wasn't one man in a pickup truck but 2 females? But they fired 70 rounds into that car. Now, the reason I show this is because the police were shot at. And so subsequently, everyone gets shot at. 2 newspaper women get shot at. It would have been high level to point out that in what we call use of force, we were extremely wrong in using that force against those 2 women, because we were incompetent, inadequate, we were terrified, we were horrified, we were constricted by the fact somebody might shoot us. So 70 for 7. That's what happened. We can't excuse their not knowing there were 2 women in that vehicle, because you have the equipment to determine who is roaming around in a vehicle at nighttime.
That is the last speaker on this item. Please let the record reflect that Commissioner McLean Hill is present.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the department's report?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you.
Now we have Item 2D, Department's report dated December 8th, 2016, relative to the Los Angeles Police Department's third quarter 2016 risk management and harm reduction strategy status report as set forth.
Sure. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the commission. My name is Mike Himes. I serve as a department risk manager. With me today. Yes,
Mike for the mic.
thank you. All right, with me today is Captain Dominic Choi, the commanding officer of Risk Management Division, and also is his replacement beginning December 25th, Captain Mike Rimkunis.
Good morning.
This is our quarterly report regarding our efforts to mitigate and reduce physical, financial, and organizational harms in four main areas: employee-involved traffic collisions, uses of force, workplace injuries, and work conflict. This report is a little different than the ones we've done in the past. Our prior reports focused a detailed analysis in one particular area with an overview of the other three areas. They were a combination of the interventions that we've developed and implemented, and also a detailed statistical analysis on our progress in those areas. At the request of the commission, what we've done now is we've changed the format, so this will be a much briefer report than in the past. What we're doing this time is we're discussing the interventions and programs that are in progress or that have been implemented, and the status of those programs. And then every other quarter, we will alternate with a data analysis. So one of the we have many programs, and as you well know, things take some time to implement. We currently have one of our cornerstones to the program is our risk management coordinators at each individual geographic area and traffic division. And that serves as a point of contact and, at each division for our risk management personnel. We currently have 16 at 16 divisions, and there's a current order that's pending to implement that department-wide, which it's at our Policies and Procedure Division now. So we look forward to that occurring. We also have several of our programs that are in the meet and confer process with the league to move forward with those. Captain Choi has some observations and some information for you, and then we can take any questions after that.
I'd like to just talk about our workplace conflict topic. One of the big interventions.
Can you talk a little bit closer to the mic?
Sure. So one of the big interventions or solutions that we've been working on is the conflict resolution course for supervisors. That's a 4-day course that we worked with Pepperdine to develop. To date, we've taught approximately 170 supervisors department-wide. The plan is to continue that to have.
The 170 people that are being taught, they're all supervisors?
Yes, so they're everybody from lieutenants down to detective twos. The plan is to have 4 courses, 1 per quarter every year, continually till we can teach all our supervisors or have them go through the course and provide them those skills. What is also developed is a command officer course, a 2-day course. So we thought it was important that not only that our command officers support what their supervisors are doing, it's a kind of a different approach rather than just cutting a 128 or a personnel complaint immediately, allowing their supervisors to go out there and try to resolve these problems and conflicts by engaging and interacting with their employees. We thought it was important that the command officers not only understand what they're doing, but also support it. Chief Beck has been to every single one of these classes. So I'm sorry, the 2-day course is developed. So far, we've had 2. Today is the last day of the second course, and we've taught approximately 40 command officers at this time. The goal is to have, excuse me, all command officers through this course by the end of 2017. The funding for that is supported by not only the Police Foundation, but the revolving training fund, the department, as well as the Command Officers Association. So we have a lot of support behind this. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback. Yesterday, when I was up in Malibu for the course, one of the command officers came in and said, their supervisor said, hey, I'd like to pass the instructors a message saying this stuff really works. I've used it and it resolved the problem. And they were really happy to have gone through that course. So a lot of success stories. We're looking forward to it, and we'll measure the impact department-wide, as time goes on with the data.
That's great. I had a question with respect to the seatbelts, actually. So in the report, it says that commanding officers are directed to start enforcing the use of seatbelts. Are we seeing that? Are we seeing officers actually being written up for not wearing their seatbelts?
Well, the answer is yes. Officers have been held accountable, whether it is actually written up, counseling, or even 128s. I've seen the whole gamut. So when there's a seatbelt violation, the issue is being addressed. And I think we talked about this a while ago in a few commissions, that we still would like to let it be the command officer's decision how to take appropriate action. They know their employees the best, and what we're trying to do is modify behavior. We don't want to cut anybody's heads off. So
Yeah.
We've seen different levels of accountability being handed down. But I think the key to this is going to be when telematics rolls out, when we're going to have
Can we please have quiet in the audience, please?
we're going to have clear, undisputed data when someone was or was not wearing their seatbelt, how fast the vehicle was traveling when
Right.
they were or were not wearing it. And that, I think, is, I will say, that is in the meet and confer process as to how we're going to utilize that tool. So I expect to see that rolled out sometime.
And Commissioner, in addition to that, the Office of Operations receives each quarter the feedback or the result of officer-involved collisions. And in that, we are made aware of officers who are not wearing seatbelts and any exceptions to the policy. There are instances in which an officer will not wear a seatbelt upon approach to a scene, for instance, or in a slow speed in a parking lot, parking in a station house. However, in the instances in which they violate a policy, the office and the 4 geographic bureau chiefs are reviewing the actions taken by the involved commanding officers to ensure consistency. While we want and we are avoiding strict or inflexible rules, if you will, we do want to have an expectation of that officers, when they're in violation of policy, can expect that corrective action will be forthcoming.
And we have the telematics in place in Hollywood, correct?
That's
Correct.
correct.
How long has that been in place?
1 year.
A year? And do you feel like we have high, or do
Well-
we have high rates of compliance in Hollywood?
I can tell you they're in the upper 80 percentile, 87, 88 percentile. When they first started, they were in the 70 percentile, so it has increased.
Great. Okay. Any other questions on this item?
No.
Any other questions on this item? No? Thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
We have 4 public comment cards, starting with Mr. Michael Williams, followed by Mr. Herman.
Oh, why do you have to have a policy? Why do you have to have a policy? Because there are people,
So it's supposed to be a report about whether or not, not whether or not, but it's supposed to be a report on the risk management and harm reduction that the police department goes through. But I haven't heard actually any other steps that actually are going to make it so that the risk of people in this city, especially black people, are going to be mitigated. Because you guys are still hitting on target for the most people killed in the United States by any of the police department. You guys, I think you guys, with this last shooting, you guys are over your quota. So, what parts of this, right? What parts of this are you risk managing? Are you risk managing for your own officers? Yeah, of course. Your officers are pretty much safe, right? Because you put their safety before the safety of the community. That's what your job is, right? So black people can be expendable. Innocent black people, innocent black young men, sons, mothers, they can be expendable as long as your officers get to make it home at night when nobody's targeting them. So where's the risk management? Where's the harm reduction going to with the community that you're supposed to protect and serve? I'm looking at it right now. You're supposed to protect and serve this community, yet where's the risk management and the harm reduction towards the community, which you have? If there's been any implementation to try to curb that, it has sincerely failed because of the fact that we are over quota here in Los Angeles, and police shootings and police deaths by police.
Next, we have Mr. Herman, followed by Mr. Andre Cherry.
Oh, so you see, the high-risk management, once again, is on the red. More killings than any police division in the state of California. All because you fear minorities, the growing minorities. What the hell's going on in this city? Are we realistic of what really is happening here when it comes to risk management? Just a while ago, I was kicked out of this meeting on a recess. Not for a Reese's peanut butter cup, but the officer told me to take off my hood. I said, why should I take off my hood, bro? I've been in the meeting. I'm a part of this constituency here just because I'm a puppet. So which puppet you talking to? This guy or myself? So I had to take my hood off. It cost me a lot of time. A lot of time because I just want to be in a meeting. Just in a meeting, talking to y'all. You see, risk management, Mr. Soboroff, when you protect development and you gentrify us into our poor communities, you see what happens? You cause disruption in our lives. Come on, Soboroff. You know what I'm talking about. And what about you, Mr. Uncle Tom? What about you? What about our risk management? You just kicked the man out of a meeting simply because he spoke out sitting down over there. But not to no one's fault. After all, you're using enforcement of risk management. You can't even put a seatbelt on. I wear my seatbelt in my seat car. I thank you, Ms. Hill, for paying attention to me, but it's very difficult in this risk management situation. It's like flipping a coin. Ask the Inspector General. He doesn't know any better. That's the reason why we have risk management.
Next, we have Mr. Andre Cherry, followed by Mr. Tut Hayes.
Ms. Secretary, could you check that thing? I turned in a card for number 4.
We're on item 2D, sir.
2D, I mean, 2D. I turned in
Can
a
you
card.
please cede the mic to the next speaker?
I don't have a card with your name, sir, for this
I
item.
turned it into one of your officers. Did they throw it away, or what'd they do with it?
We're not on item 4, sir. Call the speaker, please.
Mr. Andre Cherry?
So this happened last time, and I spoke out about it, and I'm gonna bring it up again because I've seen it again, and it's really sickening. Again, we see you guys giving yourselves this time props, boosting up what your work has been, and to do so again is shameful because all the work that you're doing feeds into a system that is killing disproportionately Black and brown people. And that's what you're applauding. Because every time you do work for this system, you're dealing with that system and uplifting it and perfecting it. In fact, that's what this is about. You guys are wanting to get your cops to be safer so that they can continuously kill Black and brown people, so that they can continue to do their jobs, which is to kill or criminalize Black and brown people. That's their job. And so you guys are, working on that and propping yourself up on that and ensuring the safety of people who are killing my people. People like this guy, people like, the officers that sit around us. These are our enemies. We don't have any allegiance with these people. There's no community building that can be done with these people because these people are killing our people. And so to do that would be ridiculous. How do you make our neighborhoods safer? How should we trust you to protect us when you are the reason we are being killed? We were talking about just the first one that we were talking about was the SWAT team being brung in to protect us. That's not protecting us, that's killing us. And you're not gonna try to confuse those two things. You're not gonna try to switch those two things up, which is what you're trying to do here today. We know that you're not here for our safety. We understand that. And why should we want to back you saving yourselves? When in doing so, you will be killing us. Why would we be backing that? That does not make any sense. You are killing us and ensuring your safety to do so. I wish you no good health. I wish you no safety. I hope that every day you walk out your house feeling as unsafe as I feel when I come in this building. I wish every day you go to sleep feeling as unsafe as I feel walking through my neighborhood because of you. I wish that you feel that kind of unsafety. I wish that every time you go to sleep, you do so with night tremors. I hope you're triggered in the way that I am, in the way that my people have been for years. We have genetic trauma lying in our bones because of you. In our bones, it's become genetic. And you're asking us to agree to you saving yourself and protecting yourselves? Why would we want to protect you? What reason do we have to want your safety? I want you to feel afraid.
Thank you for your
I
comments.
want you to be fearful. I want you to be ashamed. You should feel shame.
Call the next speaker, please.
On within the department. Many officers are very unhappy, and guess what? They take it to court, and they get settlements. They get a great deal of money. But more important, it's not that they dislike their job, they dislike how they're being treated and abused and manhandled on their job. Manhandle means that many female officers claim sexual abuse. And I don't know whether that's part of the report. I haven't had an opportunity to look at it, but the last time I looked at it, I saw this astounding number of complaints on the part of police officers within the department. And I don't know how you handle that. I don't know whether there's going to be some corrective action as far as the females in the department. One thing I might point out, that as far as this room is concerned, one of my colleagues pointed out that the female officers have a very calming effect in this room. I don't think it's because of our, anyway. And it's not a fight or flight with them. It's more that when they step forward and actually have a feminine attitude, most of the belligerents and hostile males will kind of calm themselves. But nevertheless, that's something I've observed and others observed. But more importantly, back to the question of risk management. What does the department do about the disbelief? Well, we know there's a union. The union can step forward in certain circumstances. But does the police department have the policy of examining the level of discontent within the department and how to mollify these people or correct their behavior, whatever? Thank you.
Do we have any other comments on this item?
We have no more comment cards.
Do I have a motion to approve item 2D?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next, we have item 2E, Department's Report dated December 9th, 2016, relative to the Internal Affairs Group's Constitutional Policing Unit and Bias Policing Complaint Mediation Program as set forth.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Commander
Morning.
Stuart Maisland, Commanding Officer of Internal Affairs Group. You have our actually very brief report in front of you. I'm not sure how much detail you want me to go in. I'd be happy to respond to your questions, of course. Going back in time, the consent decree required that the department improve in our investigations of bias policing or racial profiling. And to make that happen, in 2010, we created a constitutional policing unit to comply with the consent decree and, of course, the transition agreement, which is the agreement that was entered into when we got out of most of the consent decree. So the purpose of the constitutional policing unit was to, of course, investigate bias policing complaints to some extent. And what they did, they were a small unit comprised of 1 supervisor and 4 investigators. And similar to what we do now with our bias policing mediation program, they received copies of all of the complaint face sheets that were apparent bias policing type complaints. They reviewed them and then kind of picked and chose which cases that they chose to investigate. And over the course of I think 4 years that they were in existence, they investigated about 120 bias policing cases. The average per investigator was about 3 to 7 cases per investigator. And the remaining bias policing cases, of course, were investigated by Administrative Investigation Division or Criminal Investigation Division investigators. So 120 or thereabouts were done by the Constitutional Policing Unit, while 900 plus were done by AID and CID. But the benefits of the Constitutional Policing Unit, what was uncovered was that the department needed to improve on our complaint intake, and we needed to have an actual protocol and some standards to investigate bias policing cases. And those were implemented as a result of having the Constitutional Policing Unit's early foray into conducting bias policing cases. What we found by improving the intake procedures and having investigative strategies for bias policing cases and the protocols, that really resulted in improving the level of investigation of all of the cases we do beyond just bias policing. So there were some distinct benefits from that. So I guess the question is, what happened to the Constitutional Policing Unit? In January 2014, the officer in charge of that unit retired. Matter of fact, he's the Assistant Inspector General who is sitting here this morning on the SWAT selection report. And we were down to 4 investigators. Actually, 2 had left pretty much at the same time. Of the 4 investigators, 2 left Internal Affairs to go to other assignments, and 2 promoted to the rank of lieutenant and left. And we had about that time 30% vacancy rate in Internal Affairs. And I made the decision, I had 2 options. I could either restaff the bias policing unit, which I want to do, I intend to do in the future, just haven't done it yet. Excuse me. In order to restaff the bias policing unit, I would have to take resources from, the Constitutional Policing Unit, take resources from either AID or CID. Now, during its life, the Constitutional Policing Unit, I think I said, handled anywhere from 3 to 7 investigations per investigator. Currently, and over the last couple of years, AID investigators handle about 9 cases per employee, per detective, and CID investigators handle 11 cases, and then my other employees that conduct investigations in my complaint classification unit, they handle all of the use of force cases and the complaints that come out of the categorical uses of force when you decide that there's an AD. They handle about 13 cases per investigator. So I had to make some decisions. If I'm going to remove investigators from those other entities, their caseload is going to go up for really a unit that handles a relatively small number of cases. And that would impact on our 5-month goal attainment, which is critical. Again, it was a consent decree requirement, and one that we're very proud of because we've increased our 5-month goal attainment from in the 20s to right now it's at 91% in all of IA. So, it's basically a management decision of how best to utilize resources at the current time, given that we still have a great number of vacancies that we can't fill. So that's basically the reason behind it. So if you have questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Commander, would you move also into, while you're giving a briefing on the report, the bias policing complaint mediation program? That's the second portion of your report.
Well, let's deal with this portion first. So how many funded positions do we have that are not currently filled?
Well, I can't be certain because our records And
Can we please have quiet in the audience, please?
our records in internal affairs are probably different than the department's records. I mean, as far as the chief has had to and has the ability to move resources around the department. And when SWAT was expanded, I'm sure that a good number of what we considered vacancies at the Sergeant 2 rank were probably used to fill the supervisor positions. And did I say SWAT? I'm sorry, I meant Metro, in Metropolitan Division. So, while we're still tracking probably a larger number of what we believe to be vacancies, the reality is that I'm sure we don't have those vacancies anymore. Because I think there were no budget increases for the expansion of Metro. So that had to come from somewhere internally.
Chief Moore, do you have any insight into that?
The commander's correct in the sense that the department's currently looking at its entire table of organization to understand where the vacancies exist, if you will. Our staffing right now for Professional Standards Bureau is essentially flat for the last 2 to 3 years. They ebb and flow with promotions and retirements, as every unit does. So there are challenges within Professional Standards Bureau as to the balancing of where their personnel are at. They've made the internal decision to realign these complaint investigations rather than it being through this Constitutional Policing Unit 1+4, is to spread those investigations across other aspects of their operations as a means of efficiency. Now, the key here, I believe, is, in talking with Chief Beck about this as well, is looking at the resulting investigations. Are the resulting investigations meeting the standards that were envisioned by the establishment of the Community Policing Unit? If they're not meeting that standard, then it makes sense to have further specialization. However, if they are meeting the standards, and this is a preference in the sense of, the commission or the department.
If we cannot have order in here, then we're going to clear the room so we can actually hear the report and act on it.
Yeah. If the standards are not being met.
If you disrupt again, I'm going to ask you to leave. Yes.
So if the standards of the investigations that are established for bias policing complaints have not been met or are not being met, and we attribute that to a establishment or the dissolving of a unit, then certainly the department and Professional Standards Bureau needs to re-examine that. But conversely, as the organization, which is about 115 people short of our established table of organization, those vacancies occur. They occur in all aspects of the department's operation. And as we look and seek efficiencies and trying to cover our requirements throughout the organization, there are gaps and there are areas that PSB encounters, as does operations, as does special operations, as does training. And this commission has been made well aware of those, and in some instances has directed the organization to address those over and above other aspects. And I see Chief McCarthy here. I don't mean to give you a long-winded answer, but I do mean to give you more details than just a quick snippet.
If I may expand upon one thing that Chief Moore said, the Inspector General has done reviews of our bias policing investigations in the last 2 years, and last year, their report in December of 2015, they reviewed 137 complaints. And if I can just quote one bit, and this is a quotation, they found the department's investigation, adjudication, and internal review of bias policing complaints to be generally thorough, complete, and performed in compliance with policy. So I think that kind of reinforces what Chief Moore was saying. I mean, the Inspector General, has reviewed what we're doing.
The relationship of, we have a director of the Office of Constitutional Policing and Policy, R.F. Alarcon, and his relationship to this input on the staffing and making sure things get done, is he involved in that?
Only at the standpoint that he's a direct report to the Chief of Police, so he, along with Chief Moore, the other assistant chiefs, Chief McCarthy, when they discuss resource issues as to where to deploy resources and how to deploy resources. He certainly has input at that level.
Good.
How does the staffing of PSB today, ma'am, can you please leave the room? I've asked, you need to leave. Okay, I'm asking you to leave. Can you please leave?
He's a liar. You're all liars. You're a board of liars. It wasn't only 130 something, it was 1,356. It was sustained, 100% thorough. And actually, it was about 30,000 other complaints, including 176 complaints against LAPD officers for sexual misconduct. So let's talk about that. And domestic violence. And theft. And theft. LA's finest. Fuck you all.
Okay, can we have order, please?
Tell the whole story. Tell the whole story. Stop lying.
How does staffing of PSB today compare to under the consent decree? In terms of the number of bodies?
Well, I can't speak exactly to what it was under the consent decree. Chief McCarthy and I have been in PSB and internal affairs since early 2013, early to mid 2013. But as far as our staffing at that point, we tracked our staffing. We had about a 30% vacancy rate, and it's consistent to where we are today. It really hasn't changed at all.
But that's post-consent decree.
That's post-consent decree.
So, are you?
Go ahead, yeah.
Chief Moore, thank you for your extensive comments on this area. In this area, I guess it troubles me that we have a process that, from my perspective, is less specialized and less rigorous than the process prior to the dismantling of the Constitutional Policing Unit. It also troubles me that we, when I was in college, in student government, a good friend of mine who's gone on to be a very, very successful person in the nonprofit community used to say you could justify a hole in your head. Last week, we talked about 13 officers assigned to the police and firemen Olympic Games or whatever it is. I don't know what you call it, but we found personnel totaling, somewhere upwards of $6 million to go supervise the implementation of a sporting event, which I don't have a problem with. And I do recall that I was assured on multiple occasions by the chief, as was Commissioner Soboroff, that, that had generated a great deal of approval and at a number of levels. So it's difficult for me to hear that somehow we don't have the personnel to staff the Constitutional Policing Unit. And it is also difficult to continue to hear a process deemed operating as intended that continues to yield zero results as it relates to the actual finding of any sustained complaints. We have to begin to acknowledge that the process, while perhaps technically meeting some standard, isn't really doing what it needs to do. I would encourage additional thinking along the lines of how we staff and what our priorities are and what we focus on, because there is a point at which saying one thing and doing something else becomes a little too transparent and begins to threaten credibility. So I don't know that I have a question, except perhaps to wonder what the prospects for and likelihood are of additional work and thinking being done in the area of complaint investigations. I'm encouraged by the Inspector General's app and look forward to a presentation on that next week. But I'm interested in what the prospects are for additional thinking on both how we approach investigations and for how we staff that particular area of our inquiry, specifically as it relates to bias policing.
Well, I do want to emphasize one other thing, and I appreciate your comments, and this is something that has been troubling for the past 3 years since I've been in internal affairs. I mean, I had a grand design to not only restaff the constitutional policing unit at some point, but to actually expand them and use them for even greater kinds of investigations. But at the same time, I do want to point out, and I want to try and assure you, if I can, that no other level of complaints that we investigate in internal affairs receive greater concern and greater use of our resources than our bias policing complaints. We have our complaints are investigated by investigators assigned to different investigation sections, and when they're approved, they're generally approved by lieutenants, and most of them are then sent out for adjudication. Bias policing complaints, along with some others, but bias policing complaints, every single one has to be signed off by the captain of either AID or CID, or if my people do it, by me, before it goes out to be adjudicated. So no other category of complaints in their entirety are going to be reviewed through that level before it gets sent out to be adjudicated. And then, of course, I've reported on in the past, we put in procedures at the, when they come back from adjudication, where every single complaint is reviewed, not only through the normal quality control process we have at our review and evaluation section, but every bias policing complaint has to come into my office, and I will personally review each and every one to make sure that it meets our standards, that we gave it the full investigation, the best investigation we could, and that the adjudication was appropriate. And when we find that there are errors or some concerns that we have, we deal with it at that point, whether it's additional investigation that needs to be done, or if the adjudication was inappropriate, or we disagree. I shouldn't say inappropriate, because reasonable people can choose and can disagree on evaluation of evidence. But if there's a disagreement between our view, or should I say my view, and the chain of command that adjudicated it, then we kick it up one level higher. And since the vast majority of the field force works for Chief Moore, it'll go to Chief Moore, and he'll be the final decision maker on the adjudication. No other level of complaints receive that level of scrutiny and oversight on the department, so we do take it seriously.
You're saying the work gets done, but the question is, if you had your wish and restaffed it, would the work get done better?
Well,
because you're saying the work's getting done. You're saying the work's getting done very well. It's not a void in the work getting done. If that's the case, then why do you feel like you need to restaff it? What would be better if you did?
Well, you can always do more.
I got it.
I mean, we could probably use resources to spend a little more time looking at what else is going on in the industry. I mean, we did that in responding back to the big report that we did. How long ago was that now? A month ago, I think. I mean, you can always do more research into what's going on in the industry, what the industry standard is.
Would the cases be dealt with in a different way?
I think that because of the number of cases, it would be very hard to have a unit exclusively handle bias policing complaints. It would have to be quite a large unit, which our staffing cannot afford at this point. So what they were doing was, I think the better use of it is to look at the industry standard, how we can improve, use a group of people to do that, and maybe look at the more egregious or concerning labor-intensive kind of bias policing complaints. Because of the level of review that they currently get, we do a very good job. They go through several phases of review. The intake is better than any intake that we do for any of, because there are protocols.
Right.
So I think to use a group of people, maybe to look at the processes, look at the standards, the industry standards, and to do a better job that way, and to bring that back to educate our investigators. The investigators are doing a good job. And again, it would be very difficult to get. We would probably need, 12, 15 people to do the number of complaints that we have, and we just don't have the numbers to support that.
Well, in reality, the department is not through looking at any of its deployment. We're never through. We're constantly balancing what we have versus what the demands are. As a reminder, in the 3 years, during the use of this unit, 1+4, they handled 120 of the 1,050 bias policing complaints. So we need to be clear that it's not 1 in 4 that were taken away from nearly 1,100 bias policing complaints. They handled 120 of the larger universe. And what the representation by PSB today has been that the efficiency of their unit was gained by, rather than having those people do problematic and kind of brush fire instances of specialized cases, that this is the worst of the worst, so we're going to have these 1 in 4 work on that. They ensured the standards, the investigative protocols, the intakes were such, the standards were rigorous enough, and they required the other investigators in internal affairs. Now, as a reminder, we have 5,000, 6,000 complaints of misconduct involving the department.
About 4,000 a year.
4,000 a
Sorry,
year.
less than that, actually.
And a portion goes to Professional Standards Bureau. Not all of them, just a segment. And this is a segment of that segment. So the efforts by the department to this point, and under the wrestling with what resources they have, has been to prioritize bias complaint investigations within PSB.
Right.
Now, there's been discussions, and there'll always be discussions. Today, given their staffing, and we hear the concern about where staffing is at and where department prioritizes, but does PSB have the best set of investigations? Or should there be other investigations that go out to the geographic areas to investigate, allowing PSB more time, more resources on a smaller subset? That conversation is a conversation that occurs regularly, and I imagine, and certainly in the aftermath of this meeting, there'll be further discussions with Chief Beck, Chief McCarthy, with direct reports as to how bias policing complaints are being done. But I will fall back to a standard of review that when the Inspector General's office looks at a sampling of 137, and they generally find them to be thorough and complete, the process that was chosen by the department, by Professional Standards Bureau, in assigning these investigations to other portions of the command has not resulted in deficiencies from our stated standard. Now, to the Commissioner's remark that maybe our stated standard is insufficient, given that what we have found. We have just done and completed a nationwide survey, and what we are finding is what other agencies are finding, which is a difficulty in coming up with a mechanism that allows us to clearly identify by a preponderance through a due process when bias policing occurs. That is not necessarily the fault of these investigators nor of the standard, but of the difficulty of the question at hand. But with that said, we are committed and we remain committed to ensuring that these allegations, because the corrosive effect it has on the public's trust, is that we build that trust by ensuring that the investigations are thorough, complete, and well-resourced.
So, thank you for that. And I guess I do want to, and I realize that this will be an ongoing conversation, so I won't continue to belabor it here today, but I do want to say a few things. Perhaps, first, with respect to survey of other departments, I always think that's an interesting and appropriate benchmark. I also do want to note, though, that we take pride in exceeding the performance of other departments. So I would expect that in this particular area, that would be something that we would be looking to do. I'd also just, as it relates to how we go about determining what those standards are and how we are grappling with this issue, if we keep doing the same thing perfectly and we keep getting the same result, then perhaps we have to do something different, and we do need to go back and reconsider and think about what that difference might be. And then finally, and I'm particularly sober today, based on conversations I've had over the last week plus around the chilling effect, frankly, the demoralizing effect relative to complaints of our failure to sustain any, and the impact that is having on the actual filing of complaints. And in a particular division, which we can discuss offline, some troubling allegations regarding actual retaliation at the street level relative to complaints. So there is a good deal more to understand about this area of our engagement with communities, and I certainly don't mean to cast aspersions on the work being done by the officers who are involved in investigations. I just think the entire thing needs to be rethought.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? Do we have any comments on this item?
We have a total of 8 comment cards, starting with Mr. Michael Williams, followed by Mr. Ahmed Khan.
Go ahead.
Can I have some time to just,
You can have
don't
time, but
rush
the
me.
clock's going.
Don't rush me. I haven't spoken yet. Have some respect, see. Goodness gracious. Can I have my time back? I didn't even start talking.
Well, is it possible, just before you start, I know that the department was prepared to make a presentation, and Chief Moore actually asked or pointed out that there was some presentation to be made around the mediation program. So if you could, just for the sake of both explaining what that program is and also, letting people understand where the department, or where you're seeking to improve upon results in this area, that would be great.
Well, I mean,
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Thank you.
Really, based upon your comments, where do we go from here? I mean, that's where the mediation program and the whole idea for the mediation program came into place. When community members were upset and believed they were in the simplest of bias policing cases, if a community member is stopped and believes they were stopped based on a personal characteristic that put them in we investigate those, obviously, and the results were not, I mean, a citizen would go through what we would have a 6-month investigation, and then ultimately they get a letter at the end saying, thank you very much for making your complaint, but it was not resolved, it was unfounded, whatever it was. And we know that community members are never satisfied. I mean, they make a complaint because they're upset. And then what we also found was, in many cases, they really didn't even want to follow up on their complaints. They were just upset at the time, and that's where, then it's like, well, why are you calling me to interview me? I was upset, now I'm done. Stop bothering me. So the mediation program is an opportunity to reach out to the community members and to get them in the room with the officers on a level playing field. Part of the rules are an officer going to mediation cannot be in uniform. He doesn't have the trappings of power of a police officer. So it's on a level playing field where you get the community member and the officer with neutral mediators, professional mediator or mediators, and we find that we have cases where there are multiple mediators actually handling these, and they get to share their experiences firsthand. The officer gets to explain, well, this is what was going through my mind, and this is why I did what I did. The community member, gets to voice their concerns and how they felt and how the officer's actions made them feel.
Can we have quiet in the room, please?
They don't have to.
That's all. Warning. Can we have quiet in the room, please? Last warning. Go ahead.
They don't have to agree. It doesn't have to result in an apology, but we've had those cases where there have been apologies, where it's been eye-opening for officers that they didn't know that sometimes their actions, and not necessarily verbally, but their nonverbal actions or their failure to adequately explain what those actions were, how they actually made community members feel. And then on the other side of the coin, we've also had community members that have had, very, very direct biases against cops, and they thought that cops were all bad guys, and that they've had eye-opening experience as well, sharing their experiences.
Can you tell me where those mediations take place?
Sir, it's your last warning. Will you stop? Will you please stop? And that's your last warning, lady with the camera. Okay? You've been talking the entire time, and I've let you go.
Just one.
That's
if
it.
you
Last
could
time.
just answer this
One
question,
more
then
and
we
you're
can
out.
move to public comment.
Okay. What we try and do is we try and make these as convenient as possible for the community member.
So they don't
we
take
can have
place
them.
here?
No, they don't. They never take place here. Sometimes in the city attorney's office, if they're willing to come downtown. Other times we've had council member field offices, libraries. We've had them at night and on weekends. We're trying to really accommodate the community member because we know people have to work. People can't take a day off of work to come downtown for a mediation. So we try and accommodate our community members as best we can.
Okay, thank you. So in short, what you're saying is the mediation program provides officers and community members an opportunity to meet one-on-one away from PAB and to confront directly whatever the issue
Yes.
is that resulted in the complaint?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's really important. As I said before,
There are
there's no
times when I'd
trapping-
like to do that.
Pardon?
I said, I've had an occasion where that would have been useful for me. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
And we've had a fairly high success rate, about 86, 87%. We'll come back with a separate
Let's keep
report
going.
because we're going to recommend continuing the program because this is the end of the third-year pilot program. So we're going to come back to the board with a more substantive report strictly on the mediation program and where we're going in the future. And probably at that report, you'll see my partners in the city attorney's office because this is part of their dispute resolution program, and they'll be at the table with me, and they'll give you their point of view on it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And thank you.
Okay, let's go back to the speakers, and you can take your 2 minutes. Go ahead.
The Los Angeles Ethics Commission has formally accused retired LAPD Sergeant of violating ethics rules for leaking audio recording of controversial stop by Django Unchained actress Danielle Watts to a media agency announced Friday. So there goes one you missed. Right? 0 sustained, but the ethics community had to come and do your job for you, Bustamante. Had to do your job for you. And you say that you do things thoroughly and with care and you say, oh, all this attention is put on complaints and making sure that the complaints are found to be, if they're substantiated or not. But you have 0 complaints. You're telling me out of 3 years, out of over 1,000 different complaints, you're telling me nobody wanted to follow up. You're telling me everyone was just angry and just wanted to let it go. You're telling me that all the people who complained were somehow biased against police officers. You're telling me out of 1,000 for 3 years, you're telling me all of them were that way? Please save me the disparity, the absolute disrespect of my intelligence. You can't tell me that 1,000 people are dead liars or somehow just quit. They just said, we're not going to pursue this case. Because I've already pointed out that you've missed one, that the ethics committee had to come and find out about it. That's clear that under it states is a clear violation of ethic policies of the LAPD. Yet you guys didn't file charges. You didn't fire him. So please, save me and spare me. You guys are absolutely outrageous with this report. You're absolutely outrageous
Thanks
with
for
the
your
way that you
opinion.
do
Next.
things.
Next.
And for the most part, you guys are the fact that you have not staffed.
We have Mr. Ahmed
not passed the
Khan, followed by
constitutional
Ms.
report
Yvonne
is
Michelle
a-
Audrey.
is an embarrassment to the police department. You all should be fired because
starting-
that is
start the time.
incredibly incompetent. I waited for him to speak bullshit all day and not even talk about the issue.
You can sit down now.
Wait for 2 minutes. You can't wait for me to finish
Mr.
my
Khan?
statement, Mr. Sobrock.
Mr. Khan, want to start the clock?
I think Stuart Maisland failed the school of spin, right? I mean, it's interesting. So when you hear the language, ebb and flow, flat, capacity, transfer, IG audit, industry standard, I mean, in my community, they say you're full of shit. That's basically what we're listening to. And I think it goes back to what TFANC, when we, through our public records, we found these internal emails on when the LAPD officers broke those antennas, where TFANC sends an email saying it's an abdication of responsibility of the command staff. This is the abdication of responsibility of the command staff. But I think the bigger question is, what is constitutional policing? Because fundamentally, the Constitution is informed and guided and written by racism and bias. So so I think we have to flip the script, because they are right. That is constitutional policing. Racial profiling is constitutional policing. So we have to accept that. So they don't need staffing. It'll have to be zero sustained. There's no reason that any of the complaints will be sustained if policing, which is fundamentally flawed by design, is constitutional policing. And this is their chart. I mean, nobody talked about the stalker state. Nobody talked about that SAR is constitutional policing, supposedly. Nobody talked about the tracing and tracking and monitoring and gathering information through license plate readers, through Stingray technology, through high-definition cameras, on and on and on, predictive policing. That's considered constitutional policing, because it is constitutional policing. To trace, track, and stalk, and prey and kill is constitutional policing. So we, the people, have to acknowledge that, first of all. We, the people, have to accept it. We, the people, have to understand that to expect anything different or anything more would be really naive.
Next, we have Ms. Yvonne Michelle Audrey, followed by Mr. Herman.
Well stated and true. However, we do have in our favor that this is supposed to be a republic by and for the people, but it's a systemic issue of white supremacy. I have filed more than 3 or 4 complaints, and all of them have come back unfounded. The most recent 2 months ago, when a police officer, Tares, offered to show me his power drill. I thought that was inappropriate because, again, I stated this about a month ago. He was responding to an animal who was in distress around just before All Hallows Eve. I don't, observe that. I don't observe Dia de los Muertos. I serve the God of the living, no offense for people of culture. And I don't believe in animal ritual sacrifice or human, which is what you're perpetrating here, in justifying the extermination of a people, in filing these false reports, in justifying the demonization, incrimination, and the stereotypes that continue to justify. It's not a bias policing, it's racial profiling, it's economic profiling, it's sexual harassment against people that you are afraid of in your imminent loss of power. 1,000 complaints cannot be unfounded. I'm here to expose, like I said, the stereotypes, the incrimination, and the demonization of our people, which is being perpetrated through SARs and through the predictive policing. Okay, just for the record, for the fantasies that you people have liked to use black people for over 400 years, which is what Brother Prentice speaks about, we are not to be used as your fantasies, as your experimental target practices for your training purposes in your international or development of your international police force, black women are not to be ritualistically raped and abused and murdered and then claimed justifiable in that ritual murder of the black female. We are not just sex goddesses, your Venuses, per Sally Hemings. We're not to be, again, used as your temptresses, coquettes, because this is what
Thank
you're doing
you.
in your attempt to return to the slavery.
We have Mr. Herman, followed by
Trying to
Mr. Ted
exterminate
Hayes.
those people and then incarcerate the
Herman?
rest of us who are still alive to testify to what you're doing. Your loss of power is imminent, and there are good police officers, but how are
ahead,
you going to
Herman.
recognize them if you don't prosecute those that we are exposing? Can you do that? Separate those that are attempting to be peace officers from those who are using the badges and
The time is up. Thanks for your comments.
they're
Mr.
using
Herman,
their-
thank
but
you.
they're abusing their authority. So why don't you expose them so that we can recognize any positive peace officers? Can you do that? 1,000 complaints cannot be justifiable, unfounded. We are not all
Time is
5150, bipolar, mad, depressive, like you like to stereotype people in your character assassinations.
Mr. Herman?
Ooh, such a feud on biased policing. After all, IA, Peppa Pig grabbed my friend Mr. Herman back in 20-something when he tried to pull his arm off a podium speaking under public comment. You recall my IA? You did nothing. Exactly 6 months you submitted my report with bunch of bullshit. See, I don't have to take out my power drills to prove a point because as a little bear, I got plenty of testicle and hormone in me to stand here and defend myself under the First Amendment and the 14th Amendment, sir. So you see, you all, stop fooling with the public. Stop lying to the public. The first gentleman was absolutely correct, politically correct regarding the issue on IA. If I ever want to go back to IA, I'm going to make sure for the record I go back with Mr. Wayne Spindler and Mr. Michael Hunt, who filed a federal court case against you all fools. What in violation of the Brown Act, violation of the California Constitution, and as you point out on this paper here, what's Constitution? What's Constitution representation here, Mr. Inspector General? Explain to the public. Put it on public transparency for the record, sir. Look at me, sir. That's the same shit they tell me at City Hall. Look at me. Look at me. But I'm just a little bear, Steve. See? Steve, look, Herman's gonna show you. I got my hair, Steve, because I don't trust developers on a commission who cheat the public and don't represent public interest, Steve. That's why you gotta go, like Chief Charlie Beck. That's why the train wreck is on a mission. Choo choo, choo choo.
Next, we have Mr. Ted Hayes, followed by Jerry Dietrich.
Mr. Hayes, sir?
At one time, one of the commissioners challenged the term bias. Some time ago, back in the days of police community conflict, there was an organization called the Coalition Against Police Abuse. Sprinkled throughout the memorandum is the term misconduct. Either one of those terms, abuse or misconduct, is suitable to determine what we're talking about. Some of the things that can be considered is, in the memo, was property abuse. Is that biasness? Property abuse was a battering ram back in the day, when people's homes were smashed, the doors were broken into, and the courts had to bring that to a conclusion. Injury is not biasness, that's police abuse, that's misconduct. So this term bias is an effort to use what we call, I don't know what you would call it.
Can we listen to the public comments?
No, you can't. There's no quorum.
Okay, so we'll somebody go
Robert's
back
Rules
and
of
get-
Order.
Okay, we'll get it back.
Oh, somebody will come back eventually.
Yeah, we'll wait. Take your time. We're going to recess until we have a quorum.
Got it?
We got a quorum. Let's go. Okay, Mr. Hayes?
Thank you. Can I get 5 more seconds added to my
Sure,
time?
sure.
To my mind, constitutional policing involves this commission. Freedom of speech is one of the aspects of the Constitution, as well as freedom of assembly. When this room is cleared, we placed into the lobby, and an unlawful assembly is called, which can only be called when there's violence. Not because it's noisy, not because police don't like the company they find themselves involved in when their lobby is full of protesters. Those are constitutional issues. And I made a complaint in his office about the constitutional violations I was subject to. No president can determine whether or not you are speaking on the topic. They can't do that. You're speaking your mind.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes.
You're providing your opinion, and that's all you're allowed to do for 2 minutes.
Thank you, sir.
We have Jerry Dietrich, followed by Pete White.
Hello, my name is Jerry Dietrich. I'm with Stop LAPD Spying Coalition. I'm just interested in this issue of biased policing. There's, according to these paper, I don't know all of it about it, but what I've read on the paperwork, it says there's 1,050 biased policing complaints. And of those, 120 were dealt with. And so I don't understand what kind of a percentage that would be. I don't know numbers, but from 1,000, 120 is not too much. Then they go in to talk about this mediation program, which sounds, it sounds like, okay, we're going to mediate, but nobody is eligible if force was used, if an ethnic remark or other specific discourtesy directed at a person or class was used, a claimant was arrested, an employee was assaulted, a lawsuit was filed, a person was injured, property was damaged, excessive delay in reporting allegations, and allegations of criminal misconduct. In my opinion, I don't know how you found 80 out of that 1,000 that met those criteria. Because this whole thing, it's just a joke. It's like, okay, these people are here, they want us to have a report, we've done a report, now we'll move on.
Next.
Next, we have Pete White.
Is it the last speaker on this?
We have one more, Jade.
I'm sorry?
We have Pete White and Jade following.
Okay. Okay,
Okay.
so the last speaker?
Last speaker, Jade.
Okay, so I'm 24 years old, right? I don't have such a big career and all the experience as other people that have been talking today, and I literally cannot, I've been coming to these almost weekly since the summer, and I cannot understand for the life of me how you can sit up here and listen to this bullshit, right? First of all, trying to we keep saying this equal playing field. The thing that we can't do is have a conversation where we continue to ignore the basis of fact, right? It's not gonna happen. So we need to stop pretending that if a woman was raped at gunpoint in the back of one of these officers' patrol cars, that they wanna go to a library at night with the police officer to mediate, right? That's not how things work. That's not how people work. You say that, what did you say? The community is never satisfied. No, we're not satisfied, right? We're not satisfied in that bullshit report and your backup that you provided, that you all provided in that bullshit. Stop allowing this. Cynthia, you're the only one who is seeing this and calling it for what it is. And is it enough? I truly need to know, what is your job here as commission? What is the commission's job? Can someone tell me? Can someone speak to me? Do you see me? No? Okay, so they don't know what their job is, and I don't either. So I don't really have much to say, as it just completely infuriates me. And baffles me that you can, these people are getting paid to come and bring this bullshit here. And people are dying. People are being raped. People are being harassed. My Uber driver was just telling me that he got fucked up by the LAPD the other day. Since he's been here since he was born. Every other weekend is something. The people of Los Angeles are tired of this.
We have no other comment cards on this item?
Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the department's report?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
We're now on item number 3, report of the Chief of Police, Chief Moore.
Good morning, Commissioners, members.
Good morning.
I'm here on behalf of Chief Charlie Beck. He is attending today the funeral of Sergeant 2 Hector Villanueva, who unfortunately we lost last week. And so he sends his regrets as far as his attendance here today. We felt it was necessary and appropriate to attend that Hector's funeral. As to significant incidents and activities during this last week, I want to report on one officer-involved shooting that occurred on the 13th, that occurred on Sunday night, and then also it was widely covered yesterday, the culmination of a multi-agency task force involving gang violence in the Vermont corridor. I'll bring that to bear in just a moment when we talk about crime stats, about the importance of that task force, as well as the challenges that we're facing right now with shootings, particularly gang-related shootings. But first, regarding the officer-involved shooting, I have a prepared remark. This is preliminary information that's based on the Force Investigation Division and their investigation to date. On Sunday night at approximately 10:30 p.m., uniformed Southeast Gang Enforcement unit was in the area of 99th Street in Figueroa when they observed a large group causing a disturbance at a residence known to the officers for gang activity. That large group had spilled out onto the sidewalk and partially into the parking lane of the street. There were numerous individuals in the group who the officers recognized to be gang members. As the officers stopped their vehicle, several individuals from that group ran from the location, discarding firearms as they ran. One of the individuals who was running, according to the officers, shot once at the officers, and one officer returned fire 1 round at the suspect. The officers set up a perimeter in the area to search for the suspects, and during the course of the search, one suspect attempted to walk out of that containment area, that perimeter. Officers noticed that he had suffered a gunshot wound to his shoulder, and he was detained. The suspect was subsequently identified as 23-year-old Quentin DeRita. He was treated for his gunshot wound and was later booked for attempt murder on a police officer. Numerous individuals who had been at the residence were also detained and interviewed. 3 individuals were subsequently booked for weapon violations as a result of the investigation. Those individuals are Brian Jean Pierre, 26 years of age, an ex-convict with a gun and parole violation was the charges involving him. Mr. Artis Perez, 31 years of age, he was booked for possession of a loaded firearm. And Mr. Camel Key, 29 years of age, he was booked for possession of a loaded firearm, and also the department will be seeking prosecution for possession of a prohibited assault weapon. During the course of the crime scene investigation, Force Investigation Division detectives recovered a total of 9 firearms. 5 of those were semi-automatic handguns and were recovered from various locations in the rear yard of the residence. A revolver was recovered from underneath a vehicle, and a rifle and a semi-automatic handgun and another revolver was recovered from the residence as a result of a search warrant. Of particular interest was a MAC-10 style firearm equipped with a suppressor, like silencer if you will, and an extended magazine. That magazine was loaded with 31 rounds of ammunition, of which 25 rounds were what's known as a black talon ammunition, or it's ammunition meant to generally overcome body armor. The aspect of this investigation, or many aspects of this investigation, are still ongoing. This morning, the Chief of Police held a media availability briefing at 9 o'clock in which he provided this information and some additional remarks. As to my report on crime statistics, as the end of December 10th, the department today has a 5.6% increase in homicides. That's 284 people have died in the city of Los Angeles versus last year, 269. That's an additional 15 homicides. Of those 284 homicides, 152 of them we believe today are gang-related. We have information that supports that the victim or suspect or combination were gang members or gang-related. There has been a 4% reduction in sexual assaults, but an increase of double digits for both robberies and aggravated assaults, for an overall increase of violent crime of 10.3% year-to-date. To put that in context, that's 2,475 additional violent crimes. For our property crime side, burglaries are reduced. We are down 4%, just over 4%. However, auto-related thefts are up. Overall, Part 1 crime today is an increase of 5.4% year-to-date. That's an additional 6,066 crimes for a total number of Part 1 crimes of 117,605. Within those numbers, the department will be reporting later this month in the first couple weeks of January, our overall crime picture for 2016. As we stand here today, or as we are here today, though, we have a 6.3% increase in the number of victims shot. 71% of the victims shot in the city of Los Angeles this year to date are gang-related shootings.
Wow.
So that speaks to my last point on regards to crime. Is yesterday, Deputy Chief Bill Scott was joined with Sheriff Jim McDonald, the FBI, and other agencies to talk about the results of a task force in which the LAPD was a member, involving 3 different gangs along the Vermont corridor, in which 38 arrests were made. These individuals were responsible, we believe, for at least 9 murders and a series of shootings that have plagued the Vermont corridor area for more than a year and a half. Those, we congratulate the efforts by the task force members and the agencies working together, but what really speaks to this is that in spite of those arrests, we still see the gang violence occurring. And this past weekend, there were some 15 shootings that occurred in Los Angeles over the weekend, and so the vast majority of those were gang-related. And as the chief remarked this morning, the key for us is not the enforcement posture of the Los Angeles Police Department, it's not the results of these task forces, it's community engagement. And the community's helping us helping each other in suppressing and trying to divert individuals away from the gang lifestyle and away from gang violence. Moving on to our officer-involved shootings statistics as we report each week. Year to date, we've had 26 officer-involved shootings involving a hit, if you will, a suspect was struck. Last year, this time, that number was 35, and the 4-year average is just under 30. I'll also report on traffic collisions. Our hit-and-run traffic collisions involving serious injuries and deaths are up, with 221 suffering serious injuries or deaths in a hit-and-run this year versus 162 last year. Our motor vehicles versus PED, we have 456 individuals that have suffered a serious injury or death versus 392 last year. The only area that we've seen any improvement in our traffic safety, particularly involving serious injuries or deaths, previously have been bicyclist-involved collisions, which up to this point we had seen a reduction. Today, though, we are still at a reduction of 11%, with 109 serious injuries or deaths versus 123. But I must stress the importance here is that each one of those involve a motoring public and a pedestrian public that we're asking and reminding people in the holiday season, obey the rules of the road, be mindful of others, defensive driving, being mindful of where their surroundings are as an effort to avoid these type of calamities. Lastly, I want to talk about personnel staffing. On our sworn personnel on payroll, we're at 9,868. And civilian staffing is at 2,762. And our reserve officers, we have 411 reserve officers with specialist volunteers at 284. And our cadets number at 8,411 as of the 10th of December. And Mr. President, that concludes my remarks.
Thank you. Any questions?
No question, but an observation, particularly as it relates to the Assistant Chief's report relative to the gang task force. Last week, I had the opportunity to spend some time in a training where our officers were interacting with and getting to know the gang interventionist. And my only comment is that I am interested in and look forward to ways in which we can more directly acknowledge the role that community plays in actually dealing with some of these very difficult and intrinsic issues within a community. The law enforcement piece of this is of necessity suppressive, and also will only be effective up to a point. And we just have to, as a city and broader community, recognize that, and recognize that law enforcement has a hammer and therefore is out there pounding nails within the context of all of the issues that impact community safety. It is important, I think, that we give recognition to and provide a forum for those other critical components that are in the overall going to be far more effective in addressing the statistics that you read. And I am a bit troubled as we see crime statistics increase, that the primary response to that not be additional suppressive resources, because there's a point at which the utility of that is going to be diminished significantly.
Commissioner, the department joins wholeheartedly in that both not just the gang interventionists and the training and the importance of those interventionists from an intervention as well as prevention strategy, but the faith community and our schools and our community-based organizations all play critical roles, and we need to strengthen them even further if we're going to change this, to change these occurrences.
I would also say that it's obvious that we can't police our way out of these issues, and the philanthropic community in Los Angeles has been doubling down on anti-gang programs, alternatives, and services to underserved in these specific areas. And the one that I'm specifically involved with, the Weingart Foundation, is now doing 100% of its $35 million a year into these communities.
Any other questions? Do we have any comment on this matter?
We have 9 comment cards, starting with Mr. Herman, followed by Mr. Prentice Jenkins. I'm sorry, we have Mr. Herman first.
Who?
Mr. Herman, followed by Prentice Jenkins.
Well, let's get serious. Start the time, Steve. Get on the JOB. Stop texting your girlfriend. After all, developers abuse women. So when we talk about Mr. Mitchell-Moore, we talk about crime statistics, we talk about officers not using their seatbelts, and we discuss with everyone the opency of our constituency when we advocate against bad policing. You see, puppets have to learn the rules too. And when you work with good work ethics, people appreciate you. Now, when you're corrupted and being swindled by those who are called political puppets, it's very difficult to comprehend ethics and morale, Mr. Moore. So you make sure those police officers wear their seatbelt. Now let's get to the point. He's banging on the door. Get out of the car. Now. Get out of the car. Now. Why not?
I'm the authority.
Well, all I'm trying to do is take a break here, sir. You're in the wrong community. No, I'm not. I'm resting in my car, officer. Well, didn't you get training on how to approach a person who's rests in their car or in their motorhome? So why you fucking with me? Well, sir, it's my duty. After all, we got vendors in the city of Los Angeles, and we want them to sell without having the appropriate permits. We police follow some direction. We police don't follow other directions. So if we're in violation of the charter, it's okay, Mr. Moore? Yes. And if we're not following state constitution, we're wrong? Yes. So let's trump to it.
Next, we have Mr. Prentice Jenkins, followed by David Sanchez.
Prentice Jenkins, peace between residents and police. You know, I was outraged at the murder of Ezell Ford. Like Malcolm X said, I'm for the truth no matter who tells it. I'm for justice no matter who receives it. But I was also outraged at those idiots a few months ago who were walking around with guns talking about killing police, right? I was outraged at it. So the reality is this: a bridge needs to be built. I'm here to build it. I want to reiterate my commitment to the board. Reiterate my commitment to you, President Johnson, in how you've created the de-escalation of many of these situations between police and residents. My commitment to you, Vice President Soboroff, to your commitment to continuing to get the Weingart Center to help in expanding programs like this, and the commitment to this board. The bottom line is something has to be done, and somebody's got to do it. I'm on an island out here in the support of the board, and I'll continue to support the board. One thing about me is I don't care what you think about me. I don't. See, and that's the great thing about me, that I don't care what you think about me. That's why a lot of people like me, because I don't care what they think about me. And I'll give people the opportunity to vent. Doesn't mean I believe that individuals, I may be diametrically opposed to that individual's philosophy, but I'll give them an opportunity to vent. So continue the good work in de-escalation, President Johnson and Vice President Soboroff and this board. I'm with you.
Thank you for your comments.
We have Mr. David Sanchez next. He's not here. We have Mr. Michael Williams, followed by Trevor Gerard.
So, Michael Moore, you tout out gang statistics like, oh, yeah, see, it's not us killing your communities, it's you guys. You guys are the ones killing your own people. Well, that's bad on you and on the LAPD. Because if you guys have a budget of over 50% of the budget, of the Los Angeles budget, and crime is up 10%, right, 10.3%, that's bad on you. Because what do we need you for? What is the point of having the police department when you don't stop crime, you kill us on top of that? So what is the point of having you here? If it's just community programs, we can do that. Give us your side of the budget, and we'll take care of that for you. Instead of putting money, spending over $1,000 on aerial platform shooting training. How about you put that into gang prevention intervention? Why does community activists like General Jeff have to beg for money to fix up his park down at Skid Row? But y'all want to talk about, oh, it's the community. The community has to get together and do things. We do. We don't have the money that you have. And if the community has to do it, what's the point of having you here? So you could talk about, oh, look, see, this, it's all gang activity. It's gang. That looks bad on you. It's one of the reasons why you need to be fired. And that this police department needs to totally be dismantled. Because if you guys can't figure it out, if you guys can't have some way to stop crime without killing people, but you haven't even done either or. You haven't figured out a way to stop killing people nor stop crime. So what are you doing? What are you actually accomplishing? Nothing. But you want $10,000. You want more money to your budgets.
Next, we have Mr. Trevor Gerard, followed by Kai Utsami.
Yeah, so the crazy shit is this whole idea that it is gang activity and not a lack of resources. LAPD just had a 10% increase in the proposed budget, which is $1.6 billion. If you really cared about crime, obviously that would be invested into the community. But what we know is that this is a business, and you're sitting here propping up that business, right? Everybody else is in on it, and you get people paying in bail, or you get people sitting in your jails, and this whole sort of suppression is the word that you used, is part of that agenda. To Bustamante's report, right? So there were 1,356 allegations of racial profiling, and 0 were sustained, right? We expect that because you guys are a bunch of fucking liars anyway. But then go on to the sexual misconduct. There was 176 instances where there was an allegation of sexual misconduct. 36 were sustained. That's over 20%. That's 1 in 5. So basically, what they're telling you is that they are very likely to either rape or otherwise sexually assault you, right? But apparently, in a place that has massive racial problems and it is a history of racially loaded violence, uprisings, et cetera, LAPD is flawless in that. Is that what you're saying? Is that what you're expecting us to believe? Ultimately, I know that you guys don't care, and I see the houseboy Matt Johnson over on his phone or whatever like this. But really what we're talking about are human rights abuses. And the interesting thing is that at the point at where the country is at the moment, right, zero accountability is the door to lawlessness, right? You have, what is it you claim? You have 9,800 people on the street. When 4 million people realize how fucked up y'all are, y'all will not be able to stop that tide. And that's coming, and it's coming for all of you. I wish you well.
Next, we have Mr. Kai Utsami, followed by Mr. Tud Hayes.
Between December 6th and today and earlier, a Black Lives Matter person was being prosecuted for assaulting a LAPD member right here in the commission meeting on February 9th. The man was a Black Lives Matter person and was targeted to be criminalized by the LAPD for a federal offense. By the Inspector General. The jury found him not guilty of assault. Chief of Police Bick must have given approval to have the DA charge him for voicing public comments against the police killing of numerous people, including Charlie Africa, Ezell Ford, Richard, Rendell Jones, and hundreds of thousands of other, mostly black and brown people. Is that racism? Institutional racism? Killing that easily could have been avoided. They didn't like the nonviolent loudness of his voicing police misconduct, killing, murders. That this commission does nothing about and lets it go on. What is this commission going to do to stop this kind of abuse? Not only killing people, black and brown, but now charging people voicing their constitutional right of free speech. You call that constitutional policing? This commission does nothing. You're totally useless, totally undemocratic. It's disgusting.
Next, we have Mr. Ted Hayes, followed by Andre Cherry, and finally, Ms. Tiffany Guerra.
Police Officer Mary O'Callahan gets jail time and apologizes to the mother of Alicia Thomas. She says, "I'm extremely sorry for the loss of your daughter. I only know what I read in the LA Times. This is not an apology." She didn't say, "I'm extremely sorry for striking your daughter with an open hand and kicking her in the crotch, which might have had something to do with the death of your daughter." That's why I think that the police department in this use of force of 2015, had they shown a picture of that vehicle, of those two newspaper delivery women with the 70 bullet holes in it, they could caption it, they could identify what it's about, but point out that it was an exceptionally violent and unnecessary use of force. But that was a use of force. Fortunately, those women were not killed. I'm so pleased to hear that. I hope the department is also. But this is not an apology. She didn't say, "I might have contributed to the death of your daughter, and I'm extremely sorry for that." She says, "Every night I pray for your children." Okay, fine. Callahan has 2 children also. But I cannot understand this document. I want to find out how much we paid for this, talking about budgets. Full color, glossy, slick. How much did we pay for this, Mr. Chief Mike? Anyway, this is the way officers shape up an apology. I'm extremely sorry for the death, but not for my contribution, not for my activity, not for my misbehavior, not for my misconduct, not for my abuse that led to the death of your daughter, but just because she's dead at your hand, Callahan.
Next, we have Mr. Andre Cherry, followed by Tiffany Guerra.
I mostly want to talk to you, Cynthia, right? Earlier you said something about how you hear them saying that all the work is being done, but you don't see the impact of that. That's because you misunderstand what the impact is actually meant to be. The impact is not meant to be keeping us safe. And I think you still have the hold the belief that that's what the police are meant to be doing. But the impact is perfected. And the impact that is being shown is a perfected impact. The impact is we want to kill about 26, hopefully next year 27, maybe next year 28 people from LA. The reason they want to do this is the same reason that they want to criminalize the people in LA. It's not to ensure the safety of the neighborhood. As you heard, the high number of arrests is not accounting for any lack of criminality in the neighborhood. The reason that they want to criminalize them and put them in jails dead or move them to Lancaster and Palmdale is because we're trying to make this LA place for white people. We're trying to gentrify it so they can live here. White people ain't about to live with a whole bunch of loud ass niggas. And that's the absolute truth. They're not about to live around a whole bunch of niggas they're not. That's the absolute truth. When you talk to white people about their problems with downtown neighborhoods, it's too black for them. That's their problem. And so they're trying to move us out so that white people don't have to deal with loudness, so that white people don't have to see homeless people, so that white people don't have to see any kind of actual pain. Because when you go to our neighborhoods, that's what you see. You know how I know? Because I've been living that life my whole life. Every day I wake up in pain. Every day I see the pain. I have to deal with seeing cops. I have to deal with seeing poverty. I have to deal with seeing my people laid out on the middle of streets with nothing to protect them, nothing there to be for them, nothing except y'all who arrest them and make their lives even more dangerous. So I don't want to see it, so I would expect that white people who have had the luxury their entire lives of seeing nothing but greatness do not want to see homeless people on the streets. So that's why your cops and your officials and all the people here have perfected what the impact is. And that impact is to get rid of black people. It's to get rid of brown people. It's to get rid of undocumented people. It's to get rid of poor people so that white people have an easier time living in Los Angeles. You see we're building up the buildings.
Thank you
see
for your
that now
comments.
Starbucks are not letting people use the fucking bathroom. People have to piss on the fucking streets, and then that's
Thank
the
you for your
reason to
comments.
arrest them. Oh, they're naked. There's another reason to arrest them.
We have,
we make all kinds
following,
of reasons
we
to arrest
have
them. We
Ms.
don't give
Tiffany
these
Guerra.
people showers, though. We don't give these people access to anything to keep
Sir.
themselves up. We don't give them resources, which
Sir,
is
your
what we're
time is
asking
up.
you for. We're asking you for you to use the money
Time
that
is
you
up.
have already allotted yourself on the people of the neighborhood so that we don't have to deal with higher rates of crime, because that's how you get rid of crime.
Please
You get
cede
rid of
the
crime
microphone
by
to the
giving
next
people
speaker.
resources. You do not get rid of crime by adding more cops. In fact,
If you
most
don't, I'm
prisoners
gonna ask-
will tell
I'm gonna have to ask
that
you to
being in
leave if you
prison
don't sit down
actually
right
increases
now.
their likeliness to do crime, because when they get out of prison,
Okay.
they don't have access to a job. So how do you
I'm asking
expect
you to
them
leave
to
the
eat
meeting.
without selling a little bit of shit? How do you expect them to
Please
take
leave the
care of their
meeting.
families when you have said to them that they are not able?
Sir, you have to get your stuff and you have to leave the meeting.
What was he doing that was threatening? What was he doing?
I want you to see this because this is the point. You guys asked us here so that we can get here, so we can have conversations with you. You asked, well, how can the community, how can you build relationships with the community? How can you build bridges with the community? How can you expect to build bridges with the community when your cops are being taking out the people who have dissent with what you're doing and putting them on the streets? How do you continuously believe that?
If you don't leave the meeting on your own volition, I will call a recess, and we will end the public portion of the meeting, and no one else will have an opportunity to speak. So these 5 individuals have to leave the meeting.
Black lives, they matter here. 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 Black lives, they matter here.
Okay, we're.
Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter here.
The 4 individuals standing and the 1 individual with the hat sitting have to leave the room.
Black lives, they matter here. Black lives, they matter here. Say your name. Waukesha Wilson. 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 Richard Risher. Say his name. 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 Richard Risher.
We're gonna take a recess.
Richard Risher. Say his name. Richard Risher. Say his name. Richard Risher.
It is recessed, and the 5 individuals who were shouting have to leave the meeting.
The police commission is now in recess. Anyone that remains will not be readmitted.
To the community. When you have words of the community, you need to listen. That way things can be fixed. Nothing will ever be fixed because when you have dissent from the community, you do not listen.
You're criminalizing trauma. People are in trauma, you're criminalizing them.
You are choosing.
The police commission is now in recess. Any person that does not leave of their own will not be readmitted.
You'll be able to come back in.
You
They need to shut it off after 2 minutes. My mic's off, but his is on for a minute.
Mr. Hayes, you can stay. Mr. Jenkins? Jenkins and Hayes can stay.
She's gone.
She left.
She left. There are no more comment cards.
So let's go to public comment.
On item number 4, we have 13 comment cards.
Okay, call the speakers, please.
First, we have Mr. Herman, followed by Mr. Prentice Jenkins.
All the outcry in the world will keep Mr. B silent for the moment. You see what you do when you deliberately bring protests to a commission meeting? You stir up people, and there's no reason. Where's the apathy at a time when the cultures of life continue to clash over dollar and cents? When do we stop the victimizing of our communities at first? When do you learn from the axis of communication? Certainly not today, because there's so many threats, so many warnings. That's the reason why meetings go disruptive. That's the purpose of Herb Wesson Jr., AKA Herman Wesson Jr., who violates our constitutional right in public meetings as he lies about his identity in life, for the record. Should I go on? Let's talk about AKA Price, doing business as. Let's talk about Hugo Rossiter and his team of detectives that go about arresting people based on allegations, and then you release them with fear. Is this the way you treat a community? Is this the way you represent law and order and our civil rights to be heard? At what capacity are you going to hinder us from participation? I know what it's like to be suppressed. I know what it's like to be told that I have no right to say what I'm saying because I'm speaking out of my fucking right mind. I know what I'm saying. I know what triggers you to get upset, but I do it for a purpose and a reason. That's to engage you, to show your true colors. And that's why every time Jose Huizar, who's running for Congress, the same way that bonehead mayor of the city of Los Angeles continues to abstract everything that there's no problem, there are problems. Get a grip on it. Get a grip on it.
Next, we have Mr. Prentice Jenkins, followed by DA.
Prentice Jenkins. Peace between residents and police. I want to talk about this last election. I predict that Donald Trump will be in handcuffs and put on his way to jail, and Hillary Clinton will be inaugurated 47th president of the United States because Trump hacked the election. I compared the election from 4 years ago to this one. Mitt Romney got 59% of the white vote. Trump got 58%. Romney got 59%, he lost. Trump got 58%, he won. How's that possible? Even I can do that math. All they need to do is find out how he hacked the election. And he'll admit that he did hack it, but they got to do it before inauguration date. So you heard it here first. Trump will be in handcuffs and on his way to jail. Also, I want to talk about Nat King Cole, first black man to have a show on in 1954. And I wanted to honor Nat King Cole today by singing Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa, Mona Lisa, men have named you. You're so like the lady with the mystic smile. Is it only 'cause you're lonely men have blamed you for that Mona Lisa strangeness in your smile? Do you smile to hide a lover, Mona Lisa? Or is this your way to hide a broken heart? Many dreams have been brought to your doorstep. They just lie there and they die there. Are you warm? Are you real, Mona Lisa? Or just a sad and lonely, lovely work of art? Thank you.
Next, we have DA, who's not present, followed by Walter Bechtel.
Good morning. I came in here last week about this article about the LAPD honoring their fallen heroes. My grandfather being a sheriff who was murdered in 1950, but his uncle was the police pension commissioner. I tried to say that you're not honoring the families of the fallen heroes, and somebody called me to the side and asked me to file a complaint, and I believe Sean and Lieutenant Vince were the two people I talked to, and they told me somebody was going to get back and talk to me and write me an email, but nobody has. Is there?
Yes, sir. Your email address was what you asked to be communicated with. I
Yes.
spoke with my staff this morning. They're going to send you that email today.
Today? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, I was just curious what's going on with that, if they got the wrong message. And please do not try to contact the hotel I live in, because that's a very bad problem place, the Drake Hotel. It's a very, what do you say? It's notorious. It's notorious, so. Okay, then. They will contact me this morning, or,
Yes, they're sending you an email today.
okay. All right then. All right. Thank you.
Next, we have Andre Cherry, not present, followed by Yvonne Michelle Audrey.
I meant to state earlier that on one of the complaints that I had filed against an LAPD officer, when I was filing the complaint, that officer receiving my complaint actually had falsely accused me of being inebriated to undermine my complaint. Those of you that know me, I don't even drink. I don't smoke. I don't use any drugs or alcohol. I don't even use pharmaceutical drugs. So that's just to the extent that you're quelling public dissent. Okay, 1,000 people cannot be 5150, bipolar, manic depressive, schizophrenic, psychotic, or delusional, the way you like to misrepresent those of us that are still alive to speak against this. Again, I'm speaking against the stereotypes that are used to justify the fact that you're experimenting gene mutation on that level. Yeah, experimenting on people. I'm objecting to the use of hypnosis under your confidential and highly classified, very special programs implemented by your Secret Service and your counterintelligence agents, so you can get in and out, shoot people up, have an involuntary gender reassignment, however you're trying to subjugate and or torture experiment on us. For the record also, I'm exposing this reversal of culpability, reversal of guilt, which has been used traditionally to maintain white supremacy, falsely accusing the whistleblowers. White women, attack me. Apparently, they don't like, for instance, sexy black women, because traditionally we have gotten more attention from them 400 years. This is why most of us are this complexion. I'm tired of being attacked by white women. And then when I serve them appropriately and take it to the courts, You know, they make a motion to the bailiff, and then I'm falsely accused for what white women do in attacking me. Okay, this is reversal of culpability, in which case, where some black men have been abused by police officers that always are accused falsely for assault on the police officer, resisting arrest. Okay, this whole system is evil. Not only white supremacist, but it's evil and maintenance of the status quo. Whether you're low-level Illuminati or whatever, okay, you know your time basically is
Thank
we're
you
at
for your
that point where
comments,
you're losing your power. And you
Next.
cannot exterminate all of us because God is still greater.
Thank you for your
you
comments,
have no
ma'am.
conscience,
Next,
but you know
we
there is
have
right,
Michael
but there
Williams,
is a
who's
God,
not present,
and you are
followed by
responsible to
Audrey
that
George.
God. And you all have children, and you all have that responsibility.
George.
And one day
Ma'am.
you're gonna have to face that God
Not
for what
present.
you allowed to happen in our communities.
Okay, thank
And
you
that's
for your
a legacy
comments.
or a curse for you
need to-
and
Next,
your
we
need to
have
move on to
Trevor
the next speaker,
Gerard.
please.
Not present. Followed by Zuma Dogo. Dog, I apologize, I'm sorry.
I'm supposed to be a household name in this city.
You are a household name. Good.
Thank you. It's good to see you. It's Zuma Dog, ZUMADOGG, and I'm here today to talk about a situation in the Palisades. And maybe Steve, you could pay attention to this. I know you are. ADS Security. You're familiar, a security guard firm. They're having a really bad habit of trying to be LAPD. When I'm sitting in my car, compliantly, in legal spaces, I got to deal with these people showing up, shining their lights in my face, saying, "Excuse me, you got to move." And this is why I'm on the park legally. Don't worry, you got to move. I'm going to call the police if you don't move. Well, good, call the police. They'll tell you to get that fucking light out of my face, and you're not the LAPD. So here's the point. Now, this shit could pop off. Now, imagine if it's somebody that's not like me that has a gun in their thing and some fucking ADS security guard starts shining his light in his face. Barney Fife, motherfucker. Okay, now, you need to tell ADS, and I'm going to follow up with the council. You need to tell ADS, you stay on your private property. We understand that there's private properties, and if somebody's breaking into a house, they respond. Tell them do not enforce the city streets. If there is an issue, if I'm parked in an illegal space, they can call the police. If I'm doing something out of city code that they don't like, they can call the police, okay? Because I don't want to have to control myself. Because when a guy comes up that's not, LAPD and starts shining a light in your face, well, it's just mano y mano, right? And I might choose to get out with my fucking metal iron bat and beat the fuck out of that motherfucker because he's got no authority and I feel under attack. So we don't want these types of dangerous incidents. Call ADS Security, tell them to keep their fucking monkey puppets up on their fucking private property and don't enforce city streets. Thank you. This is an issue for the entire community. Now, as you might know, besides being a psychotic lunatic, diagnosed as such, I'm a quality and management expert. Here's something I'm not hearing from the commission. Your job here to improve quality and productivity, ask the question, gee, how can we help you do a better job? You know, it's enough about the reports, which we're going to try better, and, we're going to possibly think of reconsidering. Just ask them, how could we help you do a better job regarding all the things that they're saying so fucked up? Thank you.
Tiffany Guerra, not present. Mr. Tut Hayes, followed lastly by General Jeff.
Most often we find that corporations which are charged with violations, and as a settlement, they don't acknowledge any fault or any guilt, any blame, any error, anything. They just simply settle. One of our commissioners some time ago pointed out that one of the stats about police activity was unconscionable. Nobody could possibly believe it. It was a 0 out of thousands of cases, or at least 1,000. And that's what I say about this. I think the department could have acknowledged this and pointed out that in response to this, they fired 70 rounds into that car with the 2 newspaper delivery women. And point out that as far as use of force is concerned, this is our most shameful event, our most horrible decline in being professional and alert, and acknowledge that. If you're going to say there's anything about use of force that we as a department are ashamed of, it's our response to Dahmer, or whatever his name might have been. and not use this picture, but use the picture of the van that they were in. No, it was a pickup truck that they were in that was shot up by 70 rounds. First of all, it would really capture the visual attention of anybody looking at this publication. But no, we didn't do that. Instead, we started showing this is what happened to a police car 3 times in the same document. That's pathetic. That really is, because we know that the police department was terrified. That might comfort some people. We also know that they were panicked. That might comfort other people. But we also know in response to their panic, they went haywire and off the rail. And they should have acknowledged the fact that use of force sometimes is wrong and deadly.
Our last comment card is from Mr. General Jeff.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the commission. I want to start off also by keeping with the theme of honoring Nat King Cole. So, moaning and groaning, moaning and groaning, moaning and groaning when LAPD roughs you up. Okay, thank you. So previously at a meeting, I spoke to an item, and Commissioner Soboroff requested that I give him a copy of my information in regards to when LAPD illegally and wrongfully used my mural without licensing. So if you could, sir, could you give this to Commissioner Soboroff? Thank you. Also, too, I have an issue where I have been trying to get transcripts from these meetings from the stenographer, and I've been told to contact Maria Silva. And Ms. Silva, I reached out and made a phone call, and I have not heard back. So I'm just trying to put that out there publicly to say I want to officially request transcripts from the stenographer from an earlier previous meeting in June and from today as well. What is the process? I put out a phone call. I have not received any information yet on what the process is. Who do I need to contact?
Ms. Silva's here. She'll talk to you after the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Tefank.
You're welcome, sir.
Nothing further.
We don't have any public comment cards for number 5, closed session. The Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss items number 5A, 1, 2, and 3 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Just like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah, I can go, okay. The Board of Police Commissioners has concluded its work in closed session. We are back in open session. In closed session, item 5A1 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item 5A2 was discussed and the chief's recommendations were unanimously adopted. In closed session, item 5A3 was discussed and the chief's recommendation recommendations were unanimously adopted as amended. Mr. President, is there a motion to adjourn?
We have a motion. And we have a second. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.